Zahara Bellamy stood near the back of the Darrow ballroom in a gray maid uniform, holding a silver tray, while America's wealthiest families laughed under crystal lights. No one asked her name, no one thanked her. Some guests looked through her as if she were part of the furniture. That was exactly what Zahara needed. The Darrow Charity Gala was packed with CEOs, senators, reporters, and socialites. Every camera pointed toward Odette Darrow, the woman who ruled the Darrow name with a smile sharp enough to wound. Tonight, Odette planned to announce Cassian Darrow's engagement to Celine Yves. Perfect bride, perfect family, perfect lie. Across the room, Cassian stood beside Celine, but his eyes were not on her. They found Zahara. For 1 second, the noise faded. Zahara looked away first. She had not entered this mansion to be loved. She came to find proof, the kind of proof buried behind locked doors and family secrets. But Odette had started watching her too, not like staff, like a threat. When Odette raised her glass, the ballroom went quiet. "Tonight is about legacy," she said. Applause filled the room. Zahara kept her head low. Then Odette turned. Her eyes landed on Zahara. The applause faded. Zahara felt the shift before anyone spoke. Her hand tightened around the tray, because in that one cold stare, she knew Odette was no longer going to ignore the maid. She was going to break her in front of everyone. Odette stepped down from the stage and walked straight toward Zahara. Every guest watched. Zahara stayed still, her tray balanced, her face calm. Odette glanced at the glasses. "You missed table 7. "I replaced their drinks already, Mrs. Darrow," Zahara said softly. Odette smiled. "Did I ask for your explanation?" A few people laughed. Zahara lowered her eyes, but not from shame, from control. Cassian saw it from across the ballroom. His smile vanished. Celine touched his arm. "Leave it, Cassian." He did not move yet. Odette leaned closer, speaking loudly enough for the rich guests to hear. "Some people enter fine houses and forget the difference between kindness and permission." Zahara said nothing. Odette's smile widened. "A uniform does not make a woman graceful, and silence does not make her important." The room held its breath. Cassian took one step forward. Odette looked at him. "Don't tell me this is about her." She pointed toward Zahara as if she were dust on polished marble. Then Odette said the words meant to crush her. "She's nothing but a maid." The orchestra stopped. Every face turned. Zahara's fingers tightened on the tray, but her expression did not break. For years, people like Odette believed money gave them the right to reduce others. But something had changed tonight. Zahara slowly lifted her eyes. For the first time since entering the Darrow mansion, she looked at Odette like an equal, and the room felt it. Cassian crossed the ballroom before Odette spoke again. His steps were calm, but his face showed enough anger to silence the whispers around him. He stopped beside Zahara, not in front of her, beside her. That alone shocked everyone. Cassian gently took the tray from Zahara's hands and gave it to another server. Odette's mouth tightened. "Cassian, stop this." He looked at his mother. "No one in this house is nothing." A sharp murmur moved through the room. Odette forced a smile. "You're embarrassing yourself over staff." "No," Cassian said. "You embarrassed this family the moment you humiliated someone who did nothing wrong." Celine stood frozen near the stage. The engagement announcement Odette had planned was slipping away in real time. Odette's voice hardened. "You are a Darrow. Act like one." Cassian looked around the ballroom, at the cameras, the guests, the people waiting for him to obey. "I have acted like one for too long," he said. "I stayed silent. I followed rules. I let this family turn love into business." His eyes returned to Zahara. "But I will not stand here while you treat her like she has no worth." Zahara looked at him, stunned. He had no idea who she truly was, no idea why she came. Yet he defended her while everyone watched. That made the truth harder. Because Zahara had entered the Darrow mansion to expose a crime, not to fall for the one man brave enough to stand beside her. Odette's pride burned through her face. She turned back to Zahara. "Girls like you always mistake attention for power." Cassian stepped forward. "Enough." But Zahara raised one hand slightly. She did not need him to stop this, not anymore. She faced Odette with a calm voice. "My place was never beneath you, Mrs. Darrow." Gasps scattered through the ballroom. Odette gave a cold laugh. "Who do you think you are?" Zahara reached into the hidden pocket beneath her apron. Cassian watched her closely. Celine's face changed. Odette's smile remained, but her eyes sharpened. Zahara pulled out a sealed envelope. The room went silent again. "My name," she said, "is Zahara Bellamy." The reaction came fast. A man near the front whispered, "Bellamy House?" A reporter lifted her camera. An older woman covered her mouth. Cassian stared at Zahara as if the floor had moved beneath him. Everyone knew the Bellamy name. Orrin Bellamy built Bellamy House into one of America's most respected luxury companies. Years after his death, his hidden granddaughter vanished from public life. Most people thought she was gone, but she'd been standing before them in a maid uniform. Odette stepped back. For the first time all night, her confidence cracked. "No," she said. "That cannot be true." Zahara held up the envelope. "It is true, and your signature helped steal what my grandfather left me."
"I have them. Bellamy's files. Over here."
The ballroom erupted into whispers. Zahara opened the envelope and removed the documents one by one. Transfer records, private letters, a legal agreement. Every page carried weight. Every signature pulled Odette closer to the truth she had tried to bury. Zahara held up one document. "This agreement moved Bellamy House shares after my grandfather's death," she said. "I was pushed out before I had the power to fight back." Odette snapped, "Those papers are fake." Zahara did not flinch. "Then why were they hidden in your private archives?" The question silenced her. Cassian turned to his mother slowly. "Is that true?" Odette opened her mouth, but no answer came. The guests saw it. The reporters saw it. Cassian saw it. Zahara's voice stayed steady, but pain sat behind every word. "I came here as a maid because people like you never fear the people they overlook," Odette whispered. "Security." No one moved. Zahara stood taller. The same woman Odette had mocked now held the truth in her hands. Cassian stepped beside her again. His voice softened. "You should have told me." Zahara looked at him. "I wanted to, but I didn't know who I could trust." His anger faded into pain. Zahara faced the room one last time. "You called me nothing but a maid," she said, "but I was the rightful heir standing in the house of the woman who helped erase my name. Would you ever judge someone by their job, clothes, or silence?" The first day Zahara Bellamy entered the Darrow mansion, nobody looked at her twice. That was the point. A black car dropped her 2 streets away from the estate just before sunrise. She walked the remaining distance carrying one small suitcase in her hand, dressed in plain dark clothing with no jewelry, no makeup, and nothing that connected her to the Bellamy name. Ahead of her stood the Darrow estate. Tall iron gates, stone fountains, perfect gardens trimmed with painful precision, the kind of home built to remind people they were either powerful or invisible. Zahara stopped briefly outside the gates and stared at the mansion that had quietly shaped the destruction of her family. Years ago, her grandfather trusted powerful people inside rooms exactly like this one. Now she was walking into their world, disguised as a servant. A security guard checked her employment letter without interest before allowing her through the gates. No suspicion, no questions. Nobody expected danger from a woman wearing simple shoes and carrying housekeeping documents. Inside the mansion, workers moved quickly through polished hallways preparing for another wealthy gathering. The house manager, Mrs. Corwin, handed Zahara a gray uniform before speaking in a rushed voice. "You'll clean the east wing, assist during private dinners, and avoid unnecessary conversation with guests." Zahara nodded quietly. Mrs. Corwin barely looked at her again. To this house, staff were tools, replaceable, forgettable, exactly how Zahara needed them to see her. As she changed into the maid uniform, she looked at her reflection in the small staff bathroom mirror. No designer dresses, no Bellamy surname, no inheritance, just Zahara the maid. But beneath the gray fabric sat years of pain, betrayal, and unanswered questions. She touched the necklace hidden beneath her uniform, the last gift from her grandfather. Then she whispered softly to herself, "I'm coming back for what they stole." And with that, Zahara Bellamy disappeared into the Darrow mansion without being seen. By the end of her first week inside the Darrow mansion, Zahara understood something important. Rich people rarely noticed the workers standing beside them. They spoke secrets while servants poured drinks. They exposed weaknesses while staff cleaned rooms. And they ignored the quiet maid walking silently through their world. Zahara used that to her advantage. Every morning she woke before sunrise and memorized the rhythm of the estate. Which hallways security guards used, which rooms remained locked, which staff members talked too much, which doors Odette personally checked herself. She kept her head low on purpose, never too friendly, never too cold. Invisible people survived longer. One afternoon, Zahara carried fresh towels through the second-floor hallway when two businessmen entered Odette's private office nearby. The door remained slightly open. Neither man noticed her. "She still has copies of the Bellamy transfer records," one whispered nervously. Odette answered sharply. "Then those copies stay hidden." Zahara slowed her steps without turning her head. Every word mattered. "She disappeared years ago," the man continued. "Nobody even knows where the granddaughter is now." Odette's voice hardened instantly. "Then keep it that way." Zahara kept walking calmly until she reached the end of the hallway. Only then did she allow herself to breathe properly again. Her grandfather had been right. The truth still existed inside this house. She simply needed patience. That night, Zahara wrote notes secretly inside a small journal hidden beneath her mattress in the staff quarters. Names, dates, conversations, movements. She documented everything carefully, not for revenge, for justice. Still, maintaining the disguise came with a cost. Every insult had to be swallowed quietly. Every cruel order had to be accepted calmly. Every moment reminded her how quickly wealthy people dismissed those they considered beneath them. But Zahara understood something they did not. Being overlooked was not weakness. Sometimes it was the strongest position in the room. Unlike Odette Darrow, the mansion staff noticed Zahara immediately. Not because she demanded attention, because she treated people kindly. Most workers inside the estate moved through exhausting schedules while pretending not to feel tired. But Zahara always noticed when someone struggled. When an older kitchen worker burned her hand preparing breakfast trays, Zahara quietly finished her duties without asking for recognition. When a young cleaner cried after being blamed for broken glass she did not shatter, Zahara helped her clean the mess before management arrived. Slowly, the staff began trusting her. "She listens," one maid whispered during lunch break. "She never acts proud," another added, but Odette noticed the growing respect too. And she hated it. One morning during breakfast service, Zahara adjusted a flower arrangement near the dining table after noticing one side had wilted overnight. Odette entered the room moments later. Her eyes landed on Zahara instantly. "Who told you to touch that arrangement?" Zahara stepped back politely. "I only wanted the table to look balanced, Mrs. Darrow." Odette's face stayed cold. "A maid's opinion on elegance means nothing in this house." The room went silent. Several workers lowered their heads immediately. Zahara simply nodded once. "Understood." Odette walked closer slowly. "You are staff here," she continued. "Do not mistake movement inside this home for belonging." Then she left. The tension remained long after her heels disappeared down the hallway. One younger maid whispered softly afterward, "How do you stay calm when she speaks to you like that?" Zahara folded a napkin carefully before answering. "Because anger gives proud people satisfaction." But privately, Odette's behavior confirmed something important. The woman feared losing control, and people who feared exposure often guarded dangerous secrets. Zahara only needed time to find them. The Darrow mansion looked beautiful from the outside. Inside, it felt controlled. Every hallway carried rules, every worker carried fear, and every locked door carried questions. Zahara noticed them quickly. The West Wing remained restricted after 8 p.m. Odette's private office stayed locked even during family dinners. A narrow hallway near the library led to old archives rarely accessed by staff. Twice, each week, Odette personally checked those rooms herself instead of trusting security. That detail mattered most. One rainy evening, Zahara volunteered to organize storage boxes near the lower corridors, simply to study the layout without suspicion. As she sorted old decorations quietly, she noticed a hidden camera above the archive hallway entrance. Not standard mansion security. Additional surveillance. Her suspicions deepened. Later that same night, Zahara passed Odette speaking sharply with a lawyer near the staircase. "No one enters that archive room without my approval," Odette warned. The lawyer lowered his voice. "What about the Bellamy documents?" Odette stopped walking. "Those records never leave this house." Zahara's pulse tightened instantly. Bellamy. Again. She kept moving without reacting, carrying folded linens through the hallway like an ordinary employee finishing late-night duties. But inside, her mind raced. The proof existed. Somewhere behind those locked doors sat the evidence connecting Odette to the theft of Bellamy House. For the first time since entering the mansion, Zahara felt close, dangerously close. That night, she sketched the hallway layout from memory inside her journal. Camera locations, guard shifts, archive access times. She worked carefully beneath the dim light of her staff bedroom lamp while rain tapped softly against the windows. Her grandfather's company was stolen through lies hidden inside polished rooms. Now the truth waited behind locked doors guarded by people terrified of exposure, and Zahara planned to open every one of them. Cassian Darrow first noticed Zahara because she helped someone nobody else cared about. The mansion prepared for another private event that afternoon. Workers rushed through the kitchen carrying trays while managers barked instructions without patience. One elderly server named Harold struggled to lift a heavy box of crystal glasses near the back hallway. Several workers passed him. Nobody stopped. Cassian walked downstairs during the chaos, distracted by another argument with his mother about business meetings and public appearances. Then he saw Zahara. She immediately crossed the hallway toward Harold without hesitation. "You'll hurt your back," she told the older man gently. "I'm fine," Harold insisted, clearly exhausted. "You're not." Before he could protest again, Zahara lifted half the box herself and carried it toward the dining room beside him. No performance, no audience, no attempt to impress anyone. Cassian slowed his steps slightly as he watched. Most people inside the mansion only acted kind when powerful eyes were watching them. But Zahara looked different. Real. When Harold accidentally dropped several napkins moments later, he apologized repeatedly in panic. Zahara crouched beside him immediately. "It's all right," she said softly. "Nothing broke." Harold looked embarrassed. "Mrs. Darrow hates delays." "Then we'll finish before she notices." Cassian stood silently near the staircase longer than he intended. Something about her unsettled him, not because she was loud, because she was calm inside a house full of performance. Zahara finally looked up and noticed him watching. For one brief second, their eyes met. Cassian expected nervousness. Instead, he saw intelligence, controlled, careful, guarded. Then Zahara lowered her eyes respectfully and returned to work without trying to extend the interaction. That surprised him most. Every woman connected to wealthy families tried gaining his attention. This maid avoided it completely. And somehow, that made him notice her even more. Late that night, Zahara sat alone beside the small window inside her staff room while rain rolled softly across. The glass. The mansion had finally gone quiet. Most workers slept already. But Zahara remained awake, staring down at the notes spread across her bed. Security rotations, archive locations, Odette's conversations, every day inside the mansion brought her closer to the truth. Yet something dangerous had started changing. Cassian Darrow. She noticed him more than she should. The sadness hidden behind his expensive suits, the exhaustion in his eyes during family dinners, the way he thanked staff members others ignored. None of it matched the image she expected before entering the mansion, and that made him dangerous to her mission. Zahara closed her eyes briefly and remembered her grandfather's voice from years ago. Power shows people who someone pretends to be. Kindness shows who they truly are. Cassian showed kindness too naturally to fake it. That frightened her, because emotional attachment created weakness, and weakness destroyed focus. She reached beneath her pillow and removed an old photograph of herself standing beside Orrin Bellamy, years earlier, outside Bellamy House headquarters. Back then, she believed powerful people protected family. She knew better now. "They stole everything from us," she whispered quietly. The pain returned immediately. Her grandfather died, believing she would reclaim what belonged to their family one day. That promise mattered more than feelings, more than attraction, more than Cassian. Zahara carefully placed the photograph back beneath her pillow before standing and walking toward the mirror. The woman staring back at her wore a maid's uniform, but underneath it stood the rightful heir of Bellamy House. She looked herself directly in the eyes. "You came here for justice," she whispered firmly. "Not love, not comfort, not fantasy. Justice." And no matter how kind Cassian became, Zahara reminded herself of one painful truth before turning off the light. He was still a Darrow. Cassian Darrow had everything people praised from a distance: a mansion with marble floors, a family name printed in business magazines, cars waiting outside before he even asked, tailored suits hanging in a private dressing room, accounts, properties, invitations, and doors that opened before his hand reached the handle. But none of it felt like freedom. To the world, Cassian was a wealthy heir. Inside the Darrow mansion, he was a carefully managed asset. His mornings began with reports. His afternoons belonged to board meetings. His evenings were filled with dinners where every smile carried a hidden request. People wanted him seated beside them, photographed with them, quoted by them, connected to them. They called it privilege. Cassian called it a cage. Even his silence had duties. If he spoke too softly, people called him weak. If he refused a proposal, Odette said he was wasting influence. If he showed emotion, family advisors treated it like a flaw that needed correction. So he learned control. He learned to answer without revealing too much. He learned to smile at events while feeling completely separate from the room. The Darrow name did not lift him. It pressed on him. Every portrait in the mansion reminded him of what he was expected to become. Every family dinner sounded like a business review. Every guest looked at him like a prize tied to money, status, or power. Cassian often stood near the balcony after midnight, looking across the dark gardens, asking himself one question. If wealth gave him access to everything, why did he feel owned by everyone? Odette Darrow did not raise Cassian to be happy. She raised him to be useful. From childhood, she taught him that the Darrow name came before comfort, before honesty, before personal desire. A Darrow did not complain. A Darrow did not act foolishly in public. A Darrow never allowed weakness to become gossip. Every lesson came dressed as protection. But Cassian knew control when he felt it. One morning, Odette summoned him to the breakfast room before the staff had finished setting the table. She sat at the head of the room, already dressed in cream silk, reviewing a list of donors for the upcoming charity gala. Cassian entered quietly. Odette did not greet him with warmth. She held out a folder. "These families will attend," she said. "These are the ones you must speak to personally. Do not waste time with anyone who brings no value." Cassian opened the folder: names, companies, alliances, possible investors, social connections. No human details, only usefulness. He closed it slowly. "Is there ever a room where I'm allowed to speak to someone without measuring what they offer us?" Odette looked up. "That question sounds childish." "It sounds honest." Her expression tightened. "Honesty without discipline ruins families. Your father was generous with his trust. Look what it cost him." Cassian went still. She always used his father when she wanted obedience. Odette lowered her voice. "You are the future of this family. Every choice you make either strengthens the Darrow name or weakens it." Cassian looked toward the window. Outside, staff trimmed roses under the morning sun. Inside, his life was being arranged like furniture. Odette continued, "You will protect this family, Cassian, even from yourself." That was the part he hated most. She made control sound like love. Celine Vey arrived at the mansion on a bright afternoon with a smile trained for cameras and a family name Odette respected. She stepped out of a black car wearing a fitted ivory dress, pearl earrings, and the quiet confidence of a woman raised to enter expensive rooms without asking permission. Odette welcomed her with both hands. "Celine, darling, you look flawless." Celine smiled. "You're too kind, Mrs. Darrow." Cassian stood beside the front steps, polite but distant. He knew before anyone said it. This visit was not casual. Celine was not here for tea. She was here for inspection. Odette guided her inside as if presenting a future already approved. She spoke about shared charities, family foundations, business history, and the importance of unity between old names. Celine played her role well. She laughed at the right time. She praised the mansion. She complimented Odette's planning. She treated Cassian with warmth, but her eyes kept checking whether others were watching. During lunch, Odette smiled across the table. Celine understands responsibility. She knows marriage is more than affection. It is legacy. Cassian's fork paused briefly. Celine looked at him. I believe love grows best when two people respect the same world. Cassian studied her face. She was beautiful, intelligent, composed, but he felt no peace near her, only pressure wrapped in perfume. Odette leaned back with satisfaction. To her, Celine was ideal. Rich background, public grace, no messy past, no threat to the Darrow image. Cassian heard the message clearly. His mother had not introduced him to a woman. She had introduced him to a decision. Cassian learned early that people rarely wanted him plainly. They wanted access, a seat near his family, a photo beside him, a favor placed quietly into conversation, a future secured through his last name. At parties, people laughed too quickly at his words. At meetings, they praised ideas he barely believed in. At dinners, parents guided their daughters toward him with smiles so practiced they felt rehearsed. Nobody asked what kept him awake. Nobody asked what made him tired. Nobody asked whether he wanted the life being prepared for him. They asked about acquisitions. They asked about investments. They asked about gala seating. They asked about marriage. His heart became the least useful thing about him. One evening, after Celine left, Cassian escaped to the east hallway where his father's old music box sat on a narrow table. It had stopped working years earlier, but he still passed it often. His father used to wind it when Cassian was young. Back then, the house had felt warmer. Before grief hardened Odette, before every dinner became strategy, before Cassian became the final piece holding the family image together. He touched the lid of the broken music box and felt a sadness he rarely allowed himself to name. A soft sound came from the far end of the hall. Zahara passed with folded linens in her arms. She saw him standing there but did not interrupt. She did not stare. She did not rush to impress him. She simply lowered her gaze in respect and continued walking. Cassian watched her leave. For the first time in days, someone had seen him alone and asked nothing from him. Strangely, that silence stayed with him. That night, the mansion settled into quiet luxury, but Cassian remained in his study long after midnight. Files covered his desk. Gala, contracts, board notes, investor letters. His mother's handwriting appeared on several pages, correcting details as if his life were a document she could edit. Cassian loosened his tie and leaned back in his chair. His head ached. The room felt too large, too cold, too full of decisions he did not want. A soft knock came at the door. Before he answered, gentle footsteps moved away. Cassian frowned. He stood, opened the door, and found a tray placed on the small table outside his study. Tea. No note, no interruption, no attempt to enter. The cup sat carefully away from the edge, with a folded napkin beside it and a small dish of honey. Whoever left it had noticed he drank tea plain during meetings, but added honey when he worked late. That detail made him pause. Most people inside the mansion remembered what helped them gain favor. This felt different, quiet, considerate. He looked down the hallway and saw Zahara turning the corner with an empty linen basket. "Wait," he called softly. She stopped. Cassian stepped out. "Did you leave this?" Zahara turned slightly. "Yes, sir. The kitchen was closing. I thought you might still be working." He studied her face. "You didn't have to." "I know." That answer surprised him. No flattery, no excuse, no hidden request. She gave a small nod and left before he asked anything else. Cassian looked back at the tea. For the first time that evening, the mansion felt less cold. After that night, Cassian began noticing Zahara in ways he could not explain. Not loudly, not with obsession, with curiosity. She moved through the mansion like someone trained to stay calm under pressure. She never wasted words. She never rushed to be seen. Yet everywhere she passed, something became easier. A misplaced file returned to the right desk. A nervous staff member found support before a mistake became public. A guest's forgotten coat appeared at the door before anyone asked. Even the tea outside his study became a pattern. Never every night, never enough to feel forced, only when his light stayed on too late. Cassian tested it once by leaving his door open. Zahara did not enter. She placed the tray outside as usual, gave one soft knock, and left. Respect. That was what struck him. She cared without crossing lines. She helped without demanding thanks. She noticed without intruding. In a house where everyone wanted something from him, Zahara gave small kindnesses with no claim attached. That unsettled him more than Seleni's beauty or Odette's plans. One afternoon, Cassian saw her in the hallway helping a junior worker correct a table setting before Odette arrived. Zahara spoke gently, guiding the girl's hands with patience. No superiority, no scolding, just steady kindness. Cassian remained unseen near the staircase, watching quietly. Who was she? A maid, yes. But not only that, there was education in her speech, discipline in her posture, loss in her eyes, a secret in her silence. Cassian did not yet know the truth, but he knew one thing with certainty. Zahara Bellamy was the first person in the Darrow mansion who made him feel less alone. Rain covered the Darrow mansion in darkness as most of the household settled into sleep, but Zahara Bellamy remained awake. The staff hallways had grown quiet. Kitchen lights were dimmed. Even the security guards downstairs sounded tired during their late-night shift change. This was the safest time to search. Zahara carried a small stack of returned books through the mansion corridors, using her assigned duties as cover. Anyone who saw her would think she was finishing evening work. In truth, she was heading toward the West Library. The room sat at the far end of the estate, lined with towering shelves, antique furniture, and decades of private family records hidden between expensive leather bindings. Odette rarely allowed staff inside alone. That alone made Zahara suspicious. She entered quietly and closed the heavy doors behind her. The library smelled of old paper, polished wood, and history powerful people tried to protect. Lightning flashed softly beyond the tall windows. Zahara moved carefully between shelves, her eyes scanning titles, dates, and hidden labels. Her grandfather once told her wealthy families buried secrets inside places people considered decorative. Libraries, storage rooms, private archives, places ignored until truth became dangerous. She stopped near a locked cabinet hidden behind legal journals. Earlier that week, she overheard Odette mention Bellamy records during a conversation with a lawyer. The memory stayed with her. Zahara removed a small notebook from her apron pocket and copied several file numbers she found written faintly inside an old estate ledger. Bellamy Holdings, transfer approvals, private acquisition files. Her pulse tightened. She was close, closer than ever before. Then she noticed something else. One shelf held records dated the exact year her grandfather died. Zahara slowly reached toward the books, her hands careful, controlled, almost trembling. Somewhere inside this room sat the truth-powerful people spent years hiding from her, and tonight she intended to find it. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Rain struck the mansion windows in heavy waves while distant thunder rolled across the sky. Inside the library, shadows shifted softly under the warm glow of antique wall lamps. Zahara stood near the tallest shelves now, staring upward at a row of boxed records placed far above eye level. The labels caught her attention immediately. Estate acquisitions, private transfers, historical agreements, exactly the kind of files Odette would bury where ordinary staff could never reach them. Zahara pulled a rolling ladder quietly across the wooden floor and climbed carefully, one step at a time. The higher she moved, the stronger the storm sounded outside. Wind pressed against the glass windows hard enough to shake the frames slightly. Still, Zahara kept climbing. Her focus narrowed completely on the shelf above her. She reached the top and stretched toward one dark storage box pushed deep into the corner. Dust coated the edges as though nobody touched it in years. Her fingers brushed the label. Bellamy. Her breathing stopped for a second. She pulled the box slightly forward, careful not to let it fall. Thunder cracked loudly outside. The sudden sound startled her just enough for the ladder beneath her feet to shift slightly sideways. Zahara grabbed the shelf quickly. The box tilted dangerously. She tried steadying herself while balancing against the narrow ladder, but the wheels beneath it rolled farther across the polished floor. Her heartbeat slammed against her chest. The room blurred for one sharp second, and then the ladder slipped completely. Zahara gasped as her body lost balance high above the floor. The box fell first. Books crashed downward. Her hand reached desperately for the shelf, but there was nothing left to hold. Cassian entered the library moments before the ladder gave way. He came searching for silence. Another argument with Odette had left his mind restless, and the library was the only place inside the mansion where people usually left him alone. But the second he stepped through the doors, he heard books crashing. Then he saw Zahara falling. Everything happened fast. The ladder rolled sideways, paper scattered through the air, and Zahara lost her balance completely. Cassian reacted without thinking. He crossed the room quickly and caught her just before she hit the floor. The force of the fall pushed both of them backward slightly, but Cassian steadied himself with one arm against the nearby table, while the other held her securely against him. For one breathless moment, neither moved. Rain hammered the windows behind them. A fallen book spun slowly across the floor. Zahara's hands pressed against Cassian's shoulders instinctively. His arms circled her waist tightly to keep her from slipping. Their faces remained dangerously close. Too close. Cassian looked down immediately. "Are you hurt?" Zahara shook her head softly, still stunned. "No." But her voice barely came out. Cassian's heartbeat had not slowed yet. Neither had hers. A strand of Zahara's hair had fallen loose near her cheek during the fall. Cassian noticed it before he could stop himself. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, more personal than it should. Zahara stepped back carefully, but her hand brushed his chest accidentally in the movement. Both froze again. Neither expected the sudden tension between them. Not here, not like this. Cassian cleared his throat softly and glanced toward the scattered books on the floor. "You could have been seriously injured." Zahara lowered her eyes briefly. "I didn't hear anyone enter. That's because you were standing near the ceiling searching through records during a storm." Despite himself, a faint smile touched his face, and for the first time since arriving at the mansion, Zahara almost smiled back without guarding herself first. The storm outside continued, but neither Cassian nor Zahara seemed aware of it anymore. The library suddenly felt separated from the rest of the mansion, like time slowed inside the room. Cassian bent slightly to pick up one of the fallen books while Zahara gathered loose papers near the ladder. Their movements stayed careful now, almost nervous after the unexpected closeness moments earlier. "You shouldn't climb those shelves alone," Cassian said quietly. Zahara kept her attention on the papers. "I didn't think anyone would notice." "I noticed." The words settled between them softly. Zahara looked up before she could stop herself. Cassian stood only a few feet away, holding one of the old books in his hands. His sleeves rolled slightly from catching her earlier. His expression no longer carried the cold distance wealthy men usually wore around staff. Instead, he looked concerned. Real concern. And somehow that felt more dangerous. Most people inside the mansion treated Zahara as invisible. Cassian kept seeing her. That difference unsettled her more than attraction itself. Lightning flashed briefly through the windows, covering the room in silver light. Cassian noticed the small scrape on Zahara's wrist from the fall. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." Without thinking, he stepped closer and gently took her hand. Zahara stopped breathing for half a second. His touch remained careful, respectful, warm. Not possessive, not careless, just gentle. "You should clean this before it gets worse," he said softly. Zahara looked down at their hands. Nobody touched her gently anymore, not since her grandfather died. The realization hit harder than expected. Cassian slowly released her wrist, but the warmth remained long after his hand moved away. Neither spoke immediately. because both of them understood something had changed in that library, something quiet, something dangerous, something neither planned to feel. Cassian helped Zahara return several books to the lower shelves while rain continued pouring outside. The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt careful, as if both were trying not to disturb whatever had formed during those few unexpected moments. Zahara moved toward the scattered papers near the table, but Cassian spoke before she could bend down again. "You do that often." She looked at him. "Do what?" "Pretend you aren't there." Zahara froze slightly. Cassian stepped closer, leaning lightly against one of the shelves. "You walk through this house quietly. You avoid attention. You speak like someone trying not to leave footprints." His voice carried curiosity now, not judgment. "You notice everything," he continued, "but you act like you want nobody noticing you." Zahara lowered her gaze toward the floor, because he was right. Too right. Cassian studied her carefully. "Most people inside this mansion spend their lives trying to be seen," he said. "You do the opposite." A small smile touched Zahara's lips, though sadness rested beneath it. "Maybe I learned attention comes with consequences." Cassian's expression softened slightly. For the first time, he realized Zahara's silence did not come from weakness. It came from experience, pain, protection, and suddenly he wanted to know what kind of life taught someone to hide themselves so carefully. "You know," he said quietly, "you don't have to pretend you're invisible here." The words reached deeper than he intended. Zahara looked at him slowly. No one had said something like that to her in years, not after the betrayal, not after losing Bellamy House, not after becoming a woman forced to survive quietly while powerful people erased her name. For one dangerous moment, she almost wanted to tell him everything, but trust frightened her more than loneliness ever did. The storm softened slightly outside, but tension still lingered quietly inside the library. Cassian watched Zahara carefully after speaking those words. "You don't have to pretend you're invisible here." Most women would have smiled, some would have flirted. Others would have used the moment to move closer to him. Zahara did none of those things. Instead, she looked toward the rain-covered windows with an expression filled with memories he could not understand. Then she answered softly, "Sometimes invisible is safer." The sentence hit harder than Cassian expected, not because of the words themselves, because of the sadness behind them. He studied her face carefully. People did not learn lessons like that from ordinary disappointment. Someone had taught her to hide. Life had taught her to disappear before powerful people noticed her too closely. Cassian suddenly found himself wondering what happened to her before she entered the Darrow mansion. Who hurt her? Who made her believe safety existed inside silence? "You talk like someone running from something," he said gently. Zahara gave a faint smile that never fully reached her eyes. "Maybe everyone is." Cassian wanted to ask more, but something told him pushing too hard would make her retreat completely. So instead, he picked up the final fallen book and placed it carefully on the table beside her. "You should get some rest," he said softly. Zahara nodded once. As she moved toward the library doors, Cassian spoke again without thinking. "Zahara." She stopped. The sound of her name from his voice felt strangely personal. Cassian held her gaze for a moment before saying quietly, "Be careful climbing ladders during storms." A real smile almost escaped her this time. "Noted, sir." Then she disappeared into the hallway. Cassian remained standing inside the library long after she left. The storm no longer held his attention, neither did the argument with his mother. His mind stayed fixed on one woman wearing a gray Maid uniform who spoke like someone carrying hidden pain behind every careful word. And for the first time in years, Cassian Darrow realized he wanted to understand someone beyond their last name. The east hallway remained one of the quietest places inside the Darrow mansion. Most guests rarely walked through it because the corridor connected older parts of the estate no longer used during events. Portraits of past family members lined the walls beside antique furniture covered in history and dust. At the center table near the staircase sat the broken music box. Cassian passed it often, so did Odette, but nobody touched it anymore. The box had belonged to Cassian's late father, and after his death, The melody stopped playing completely. Repair specialists visited over the years, but Odette eventually ordered the servants to leave it alone. "It belongs to the past," she once said coldly. That afternoon, Zahara paused beside the music box while carrying fresh flowers toward the dining room. Her eyes lingered on the carved wooden edges and the delicate gold winding key attached to the side. She recognized the model instantly. Her grandfather collected antique music boxes when she was younger. As a child, Zahara spent hours beside him while he repaired them patiently inside his office at Bellamy House. Back then, life still felt safe. She set the flowers down gently and opened the music box carefully. Dust coated the inner mechanism. One small gear sat out of place. Nothing major. Zahara glanced down the empty hallway before removing a hairpin from her uniform. Slowly and carefully, she adjusted the tiny wheel inside the box while her grandfather's old lessons echoed in her mind. "Broken things are not always ruined," he used to tell her. "Sometimes they simply need patience." A few moments later, Zahara wound the key softly. The music box clicked once, then the melody began playing again, gentle, warm, alive. Zahara smiled faintly as the sound filled the hallway, but she did not notice someone standing silently near the staircase behind her. Cassian, watching everything. Cassian froze the second the melody reached him. For years, the east hallway remained silent except for footsteps and distant conversation. Hearing that tune again felt like someone opening a locked memory he buried long ago. He moved quietly toward the corridor. Then he saw Zahara. She stood near the music box with one hand resting lightly against the table while softly humming along with the melody. Cassian's chest tightened instantly. His father used to hum that exact tune during late evenings when the mansion still felt like a home instead of a business empire. After his death, the music disappeared from the house completely. So did warmth. Cassian remained still, watching Zahara carefully. She looked peaceful for the first time since entering the mansion. Her usual guarded expression softened slightly while the melody played through the hallway. Then she noticed him. Her humming stopped immediately. Cassian stepped forward slowly. "You fixed it?" Zahara closed the lid gently. "I hope you don't mind. It was only a loose gear." Cassian stared at the music box in disbelief. "People tried repairing this for years." "My grandfather collected antiques," she explained quietly. "He taught me small repairs when I was younger." Cassian walked closer toward the table. "You know that song?" Zahara nodded once. "It's an old Italian melody," she said softly. "My grandfather loved it too." Cassian looked at her carefully. Another connection. Another unexpected detail that did not fit the image of an ordinary maid. Most people inside the mansion walked past the broken music box without seeing it. Zahara noticed it, understood it, fixed it, and somehow, hearing her hum the melody brought back memories Cassian had not allowed himself to feel in years. For the first time since his father died, the east hallway no longer felt empty. 3 days later, the Darrow mansion prepared for another private fundraising dinner attended by several influential families. Odette personally supervised every detail: flowers, seating arrangements, security, guest lists. Nothing escaped her attention. At least that was what she believed. The dining staff rushed between tables while assistants carried folders through the main hall. Near the front office, one young coordinator struggled nervously over a stack of printed invitations. Her hands shook badly. Zahara noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked quietly. The woman lowered her voice. "2 major donors received the wrong seating assignments. Mrs. Darrow will destroy me if she sees this." Zahara reached for the list calmly. Within seconds, she spotted the problem. 2 families with a public business dispute had accidentally been assigned beside each other. If the mistake reached the dinner table, the entire evening would collapse into embarrassment. "How long before guests arrive?" Zahara asked. "Less than an hour." The coordinator nearly looked ready to cry. Zahara remained calm. "Reprint these 4 invitations," she said quickly while marking corrections with a pen. "Move the Ellington family beside the ambassador's table. Place the Whitmores near the west wing instead." The woman blinked. "How did you notice that so fast?" Because wealthy people rarely argue quietly. Minutes later, the corrected invitations were distributed before Odette discovered the mistake, but Odette eventually learned someone fixed the problem. "Who reorganized the seating chart?" she demanded sharply. The frightened coordinator pointed toward Zahara. Odette turned slowly. For a brief second, surprise crossed her face before coldness returned immediately. Zahara expected criticism. Instead, Odette only said, "A maid should focus on serving tables, not understanding them." Then she walked away. But several staff members exchanged impressed looks afterward. And from across the hallway, Cassian had witnessed the entire thing. The Darrow Foundation prepared its quarterly charity review the following week. Large binders covered the conference room table, while accountants moved through financial reports with exhausted expressions. Odette expected perfection. Nobody wanted to disappoint her. Zahara entered quietly with coffee trays during the meeting and placed cups beside the guests without interrupting discussion. Normally, nobody paid attention to staff during business reviews, which allowed Zahara to observe freely. As she passed the conference table, one open ledger caught her eye briefly. A column of figures looked inconsistent, not dramatically, just enough to feel wrong. Zahara continued serving coffee calmly, but her mind remained fixed on the numbers she saw seconds earlier. A donation transfer had been counted twice under separate categories, small enough to avoid attention, large enough to create serious reporting issues later. The finance director continued speaking confidently while nobody else noticed. Zahara hesitated. Speaking carried risk. Remaining silent carried consequences too. Finally, she stepped carefully toward the edge of the table. "Excuse me," she said politely. The room turned toward her immediately. Odette looked irritated already. "Yes?" Zahara pointed respectfully toward the ledger. "I believe this transfer appears twice under different allocation sections." Silence. The finance director frowned and reviewed the page quickly. Then his face changed. He checked another document beside it, then another. A full minute passed before he finally admitted, "She's right." The room shifted instantly. One duplicated error connected to several additional reporting mistakes buried beneath it. Odette's expression darkened slowly. "How did you notice that?" the director asked. Zahara answered simply, "The percentages didn't balance correctly." Several executives stared at her now with open curiosity, not because she corrected the mistake, because she understood the numbers at all. Odette closed the binder sharply. "That will be all," she said coldly toward Zahara. But Cassian kept watching her long after she left the room. The woman wearing a maid's uniform kept seeing things trained professionals missed, and he could no longer convince himself it was coincidence. Cassian stopped sleeping well after that. Not because of business pressure, because Zahara stayed inside his thoughts far more than she should. Everywhere he looked inside the mansion, he noticed traces of her quiet presence. The repaired music box, the corrected invitations, the finance error nobody else caught. But what unsettled him most was not her intelligence. It was how carefully she hid it. One evening, Cassian found Zahara arranging fresh flowers near the west terrace before dinner service. Most staff rushed through tasks quickly. Zahara moved with calm precision. Every detail mattered to her. He watched silently for a moment before speaking. "You've done this before." She looked up slightly. "Done what?" "Managed people, solved problems, understood rooms full of powerful guests." Zahara adjusted one final flower carefully before answering. "Observation teaches many things." Cassian studied her face. Even the way she spoke felt refined, not rehearsed, natural. Nothing about her matched the role she played inside the mansion. "You don't act like someone born into this work," he admitted quietly. For the first time, Zahara's expression shifted slightly. Pain. Brief but real. Then it disappeared again, behind calm control. "People become many things after losing enough," she said softly. The sentence stayed with him immediately. Cassian suddenly realized Zahara carried grief the same way he did. Quietly, carefully, like something too heavy to place in another person's hands. He wanted to ask what happened to her, who she lost, why sadness appeared in her eyes whenever she thought nobody noticed. But before he could speak again, Another staff member called Zahara toward the dining hall. She gave Cassian a polite nod and walked away, leaving him standing there with questions growing stronger every day. Odette Darrow noticed everything inside her house, especially changes involving her son. At first, she dismissed Zahara as another quiet employee who would eventually disappear into the background like the others. But now she kept seeing the same problem repeatedly, Cassian watching her, not casually, carefully. At breakfast, his eyes followed Zahara carrying tea through the room. During meetings, he noticed when she entered before anyone else did. At dinners, his attention shifted toward her voice whenever she spoke to staff nearby. Odette saw all of it, and she hated it. One evening, after guests left the mansion, Odette entered Cassian's study without knocking. He stood near the fireplace reviewing documents. "You've become distracted lately," she said immediately. Cassian barely looked up. Busy doesn't mean distracted. Odette walked farther inside. "It's the maid." That finally made him pause. "She seems unusually important to you." Cassian closed the file in his hand slowly. "She works harder than most people here. That is her job. And treating people decently should be ours." Odette's expression hardened instantly. "You speak about her too often." Cassian exhaled quietly. "Mother." "No." Her voice sharpened. "I know exactly what this is. You pity her because she appears quiet and wounded." Cassian looked directly at her now. "You don't know anything about her." Odette stepped closer. "I know enough. Girls like that become dangerous when wealthy men start paying attention to them." The insult irritated him immediately. "Girls like what?" Odette folded her arms. "Girls who forget where they belong." Cassian's jaw tightened, but Odette already turned toward the door. As she left the study, one thought burned through her mind stronger than anything else. The maid had stayed inside the mansion too long, and if Zahara continued capturing Cassian's attention, Odette would remove her herself. Odette Darrow planned the dinner with the same precision she used when arranging business mergers. Nothing inside the mansion happened accidentally anymore. Not the guest list, not the seating arrangement, not even the flowers placed along the center of the dining table. Everything served one purpose: push Cassian closer to Celine Vey. The private dinner took place on a cold Friday evening inside the Grand West dining hall. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished silverware, while soft classical music drifted through hidden speakers above the room. Only a small group attended: a senator and his wife, a luxury hotel investor, one elderly family friend, Celine Vey, and Cassian. Odette believed intimate gatherings worked better than public pressure. Smaller rooms allowed fewer escape routes. Before guests arrived, Odette inspected every detail personally. Her eyes moved sharply across the table settings before landing on Zahara, arranging wine glasses near the far end. "Straighten the center candles," Odette ordered coldly. "The heights are uneven." Zahara adjusted them silently. Odette stepped closer. "And tonight, remain professional. No unnecessary conversation with guests." The warning carried more meaning than the words themselves. Zahara lowered her eyes politely. "Yes, Mrs. Darrow?" A few moments later, Celine arrived wearing a dark emerald gown that matched the elegance of the room perfectly. She greeted Odette warmly before kissing her cheek lightly. "This evening looks beautiful," Celine said. Odette smiled with satisfaction. "So do you." Then Cassian entered. His suit looked flawless. His expression did not. The second he saw the carefully arranged dinner table, he already understood what his mother planned: another performance, another evening where his future would be discussed like a contract waiting for signatures. And somewhere behind him, quietly preparing the room while pretending not to notice any of it, stood Zahara. Celine Vey understood wealthy rooms better than most people ever would. She knew when to laugh softly, when to compliment someone's achievements, when to speak confidently without sounding arrogant. Everything about her felt polished through years of elite education and social training. During dinner, she moved through conversations effortlessly. The senator's wife praised her charity work. Celine answered modestly. The investor complimented her family's reputation. She redirected attention toward the Darrows with practiced elegance. Odette watched proudly from the head of the table. This was exactly the woman she wanted beside Cassian: Controlled, refined, predictable, safe. Celine turned toward Cassian with a gentle smile. Your mother mentioned you're expanding the Foundation's youth programs. Cassian nodded slightly. That's the current plan. I'd love to support that initiative, Celine replied smoothly. Children deserve opportunities regardless of background. The words sounded perfect. Too perfect. Cassian noticed how every sentence from Celine felt prepared for approval instead of honesty. Even her compliments arrived polished. Meanwhile, Zahara moved quietly around the table, refilling glasses and replacing plates with calm precision. Unlike Celine, Zahara never fought for attention, yet somehow Cassian noticed her more. Celine noticed too. At one point during dinner, Zahara leaned beside the senator's wife to quietly replace a stained napkin before the woman even realized it happened. Small detail. Effortless grace. Cassian's eyes followed the movement briefly. Celine caught it immediately. Her smile remained flawless, but something colder entered her gaze afterward. Odette noticed the glance too, and deep inside, irritation tightened sharply inside her chest. Because despite every expensive detail she arranged that evening, Cassian still looked distracted, and the distraction wore a gray maid uniform. Zahara kept her face calm all evening. Years of surviving disappointment taught her how. But each time she looked toward the dining table and saw Celine beside Cassian, something uncomfortable tightened inside her chest. Celine belonged in rooms like this: beautiful dress, perfect manners, elite family. Everything about her matched the future Odette imagined for the Darrow name, and Zahara hated herself slightly for noticing how natural they looked seated together beneath the chandelier lights. She carried another tray toward the table carefully. "More wine, sir?" she asked quietly. Cassian looked up immediately. For one brief second, his expression softened the same way it always did around her. "Yes, thank you." The warmth in his voice unsettled her more than distance would have, because it reminded her of the dangerous truth growing between them. She was starting to care. That could ruin everything. As Zahara poured wine into Celine's glass, Celine studied her calmly before speaking. "You've worked here long." "Several months, miss." "You seem unusually trusted for newer staff." The comment sounded polite, but Zahara understood what sat beneath it. Celine was observing her carefully now, measuring. Cassian interrupted before Zahara answered further. "She works harder than most people in this house." Odette's eyes lifted sharply. Celine smiled lightly. "That's rare these days." Zahara finished pouring the wine and stepped away quietly, but the conversation remained trapped inside her mind. Harder than most people, not smarter, not graceful, not interesting, just useful. She reminded herself none of this mattered. Cassian belonged to another world, a world where women like Celine became wives, and women like Zahara stayed invisible. Still, when she glanced toward him again later that evening and found him already watching her, the pain inside her chest deepened quietly, because part of her wished things were different. Cassian tried focusing on the dinner. He truly did. The investor discussed hotel expansion opportunities. The senator praised Odette's charitable influence. Celine spoke elegantly about foundation work and public partnerships. But somehow, Cassian kept noticing Zahara instead. The way she quietly adjusted the candles when wax leaned unevenly. The way she remembered exactly which guest disliked red wine. The calm focus in her eyes whenever another staff member grew nervous. She moved through the room with quiet intelligence that nobody else seemed to appreciate, except him. At one point, the senator accidentally knocked his water glass sideways during conversation. Before anyone reacted, Zahara stepped forward smoothly, replacing the cloth and cleaning the spill without interrupting discussion. The moment passed almost invisibly. Cassian noticed anyway. He always noticed her now. Celine finally leaned closer toward him during dessert. "You seem distracted tonight." Cassian looked at her. "Long week." Celine followed his earlier line of sight subtly and noticed Zahara near the serving station. Understanding flickered across her expression instantly. Interesting. Across the table, Odette noticed it too. Her irritation deepened. Cassian forced himself back into conversation, but his attention drifted again moments later when Zahara quietly corrected the dessert placement before the kitchen staff made a mistake in front of guests. She saw everything, handled everything, and never demanded praise afterward. Cassian realized something uncomfortable then. The mansion only saw Zahara as staff, but every day she revealed pieces of someone far more educated, observant, and emotionally controlled than anyone inside the Darrow social circle. Even her silence carried depth. He wanted to understand her, not casually, completely. And that growing curiosity was becoming impossible to hide from the people sitting around the table, especially Odette. By the time dessert arrived, tension sat heavily beneath the polished atmosphere of the dinner. Odette had spent the entire evening watching Cassian's attention drift toward Zahara repeatedly. Every glance irritated her more. Finally, she decided to end it publicly. Zahara approached the table carrying fresh tea service while the guests discussed upcoming gala plans. Cassian barely heard the conversation anymore. His eyes lifted automatically the moment Zahara entered the room again. Odette noticed immediately and smiled coldly. "Cassian," she said smoothly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've been unusually interested in the staff tonight." The table quieted slightly. Cassian set down his glass. "I notice competent people." Odette laughed softly. "How generous of you." Zahara carefully poured tea without reacting outwardly, but she already sensed danger building. Celine remained silent, watching closely. Odette continued. "You always did have a habit of becoming emotionally invested in people beneath you." Cassian's expression hardened slightly. "Mother." But Odette was not finished. Her eyes moved toward Zahara with deliberate coldness. "Do not confuse kindness with importance," she said. "Some people enter beautiful homes and forget their place." The silence around the table deepened instantly. Zahara's fingers tightened slightly around the teapot handle. Still, she remained composed. Then, Odette delivered the sentence designed to cut deepest. "She's nothing but a maid." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the servants near the doorway froze. Zahara lowered her eyes briefly, fighting the sting of humiliation burning inside her chest. Not because she believed Odette, because moments like this reminded her how quickly powerful people reduced human beings when protecting pride. Across the table, Cassian's jaw tightened slowly. And for the first time that evening, genuine anger entered his eyes. Cassian pushed his chair back slowly. The sound echoed sharply through the silent dining room. Every guest turned toward him immediately. Odette's confident expression shifted slightly. She expected embarrassment, not resistance. Cassian stood calmly beside the table, his eyes fixed directly on his mother. "No one in this house is nothing," he said firmly. The sentence landed heavily. Odette's smile vanished completely. "Sit down, Cassian." "No." The guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Celine remained perfectly still beside him, though tension showed clearly in her posture now. Odette lowered her voice. "You are creating unnecessary drama over staff." Cassian looked toward Zahara briefly before answering. "No, you created it when you humiliated someone for doing her job." The room grew even quieter. Nobody challenged Odette publicly, especially not her own son. Odette's face hardened. "You are a Darrow. Start acting like one." Cassian's expression darkened instantly. "And what exactly does that mean?" he asked. "Treating people like objects because they work for us? Protecting this family from foolish attachments?" Zahara looked down immediately. The words hurt more than she expected. Cassian noticed. That alone pushed him further. "She deserves respect," he said sharply. Odette laughed once without warmth. "For serving dinner? For being human." Silence crashed through the room afterward. Even the investor avoided eye contact. Celine slowly placed her napkin beside her plate, realizing the evening had collapsed beyond repair. Zahara stood frozen near the table, stunned by what she was witnessing. Cassian was risking conflict with his mother publicly. For her. A maid. At least that was what everyone believed. Odette finally leaned back in her chair, with visible fury burning beneath her controlled posture. "You are embarrassing this family," Cassian answered quietly. Maybe this family deserves embarrassment. The sentence hit the room like shattered glass, and for the first time since entering the Darrow mansion, Zahara realized something terrifying. Cassian Darrow was no longer protecting appearances, he was protecting her. If someone you loved was insulted in public, would you stay quiet or defend them? The dinner ended badly. Guests left the mansion with uncomfortable smiles and quiet whispers hidden behind polite goodbyes. Celine departed early beside her driver, her expression composed but distant. Odette locked herself inside her private office without another word to Cassian. But Zahara disappeared first. Cassian noticed immediately. The moment the dining room cleared, he searched the mansion hallways instinctively. He checked the kitchen, the east corridor, the library. Nothing. Then he remembered the garden fountain. He found her there beneath the pale glow of the outdoor lanterns. Rain from earlier still clung to the marble paths, and cold wind moved softly through the trees surrounding the fountain courtyard. Zahara stood quietly near the water, her hands folded in front of her while the fountain spilled silver streams into the basin below. She looked calm from a distance, but Cassian already knew better. "You left quickly," he said gently. Zahara did not turn immediately. The guests were leaving. That's not why. Finally she looked at him. Moonlight softened her face, but sadness still rested behind her eyes. Cassian stepped closer slowly. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For letting that happen." Zahara gave a faint smile without humor. "You didn't say the words." "No," he admitted quietly, "but I should have stopped her sooner." The honesty in his voice unsettled her. Most wealthy men apologized to protect appearances. Cassian sounded genuinely disappointed in himself. "She does that often?" he asked carefully. Zahara looked toward the fountain water. "People like your mother usually don't notice people like me until they feel threatened." Cassian frowned slightly. "Threatened by what?" For a brief second, Zahara almost answered truthfully. Instead, she shook her head softly. "Sometimes pride needs someone smaller to stand on." Cassian watched her carefully then. Not as a servant, not as a distraction. As a woman carrying wounds she rarely allowed others to see. And standing beside her in the cold garden silence, he realized something important. Hurting Zahara affected him far more than it should have. The fountain water moved softly between them, while silence settled across the garden again. Cassian leaned lightly against the stone edge nearby, his eyes never leaving Zahara completely. "You shouldn't have been treated that way," he said quietly. Zahara's expression stayed calm. "But I have been before." The answer caught him off guard. "You say that too easily." She gave a small shrug. "Practice." Cassian studied her face more carefully now. There was no bitterness in her voice. That almost made it worse. People became calm about pain only after surviving it too many times. "When someone works around wealthy people long enough," Zahara continued softly, "they learn something quickly." "What's that?" She looked directly at him. "Most people don't see staff. They see service." The words settled heavily between them. Cassian thought back to the dinner table, to the way guests accepted tea from her without eye contact, to the way Odette pointed toward her instead of using her name. And suddenly he hated how normal those moments felt inside the mansion. Zahara lowered her gaze again. "I'm used to people looking through me," she admitted. "Sometimes it's easier that way." Cassian frowned. "Easier?" "When people don't notice you, they also don't ask questions." The sentence stayed with him immediately. "Questions about what? About who she really was? About what happened to her before arriving here?" Cassian wanted to ask. But something inside him warned that pushing too hard might make her disappear emotionally again. Instead, he spoke gently. "I see you." Zahara looked up sharply. The words reached deeper than he realized, because for years, powerful people noticed only what Zahara could provide. Not her grief, not her loneliness, not her fear, just usefulness. And hearing someone say, "I see you," felt far more dangerous than attraction ever could. After the dinner incident, something shifted quietly between them, not loudly, not recklessly, slowly. Cassian began finding reasons to remain awake later at night. Zahara noticed too, though neither acknowledged it openly. Some evenings he entered the kitchen long after midnight, claiming he wanted coffee, only to find Zahara organizing supplies before the morning shift. At first, their conversations remained simple. "How long have you worked here? Do you ever sleep? Why do you drink coffee this late?" But over time, the walls between them softened. One night, Zahara laughed quietly after Cassian nearly burned toast trying to prepare food himself. "You've never used a stove before, have you?" she asked. Cassian looked offended. "I absolutely have." The smoke says otherwise. For the first time in weeks, he laughed genuinely. Not the controlled public laugh wealthy people practiced at events, a real one. And Zahara realized she liked hearing it more than she should. Other nights they walked through the gardens while the mansion slept behind them. The conversations deepened naturally under the quiet darkness. Cassian spoke less like an heir during those moments, more like a man exhausted from pretending constantly. Zahara found herself lowering her guard too, not fully, never fully, but enough to let pieces of herself breathe again. One evening during a walk beside the hedge garden, Cassian removed his coat when cold wind passed through the trees and placed it gently over Zahara's shoulders. "You'll freeze. You'll freeze too. I grew up in this weather." Zahara smiled faintly. "That sounded dramatic." "You wound me," she laughed softly again. The sound stayed inside Cassian's chest long after the conversation ended, and neither of them noticed how dangerous their growing closeness had become until they no longer looked for excuses to spend time together anymore. One late evening, Cassian and Zahara sat alone on the west terrace wrapped in silence and cold air. The mansion lights glowed behind them while distant city buildings shimmered beyond the hills. Cassian held a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. Zahara noticed immediately. "You've been staring at that drink for 10 minutes. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm waiting for it to solve my problems." "It won't." "You sound certain." "My grandfather used to say alcohol only makes sad people quieter." Cassian looked toward the dark sky above them. "My mother would have liked your grandfather." Zahara's chest tightened briefly at the mention of him. "She would have respected his success," Zahara corrected softly. Cassian nodded once. Then his expression changed. The carefully controlled version of him faded slightly. "When I was younger," he admitted quietly, "I thought my family cared about happiness." Zahara stayed silent, letting him continue. "But after my father died, everything became strategy." His fingers tightened slightly around the glass. Every conversation turned into preparation. Every decision became about protecting the Darrow image. He laughed softly without humor. Even birthdays felt scheduled. Zahara looked at him carefully. Cassian rarely complained. That made the honesty feel heavier. "My mother planned my education before I understood what I wanted," he continued. "She chose the right schools, the right social circles, the right business mentors." "The right future wife?" Zahara asked carefully. Cassian glanced toward her. "That too." Silence passed briefly. Then he finally admitted the truth he rarely said aloud. "Sometimes I feel less like a son and more like an investment everyone's trying to manage." The sadness behind the words struck Zahara deeply, because beneath the expensive suits and family name sat a man raised to perform instead of live. And suddenly, she understood why Cassian looked lonely even inside crowded rooms. The terrace grew quieter after Cassian's confession. For a while, neither spoke. Wind moved gently through the trees while the distant fountain below carried soft water sounds into the night. Cassian looked toward Zahara eventually. "What about you?" She tensed slightly. "What about me? You talk about pain like you know it personally." The question settled carefully between them. Zahara lowered her eyes toward her hands. Part of her wanted to stay silent. Another part felt tired of carrying grief alone. "I lost someone important," she admitted quietly. Cassian listened without interrupting. "My grandfather raised me for most of my life," she continued. "He believed people should earn respect through kindness, not status." A faint smile touched her lips briefly. "He used to say powerful people reveal themselves by how they treat workers." Cassian thought about the dinner instantly. What happened to him? The question hurt more than expected. Zahara looked away toward the dark garden. He trusted the wrong people. Cassian noticed the pain immediately, not fresh pain, old pain carried carefully for years. He died believing he failed me, she whispered softly. You don't believe that? No. Her voice trembled slightly for the first time. I believe people took advantage of his trust. Cassian stayed quiet, because suddenly he understood something important. Whatever happened to Zahara before arriving at the mansion changed her deeply. The sadness inside her did not come from ordinary heartbreak. It came from betrayal, loss, the kind that reshaped entire lives. Zahara inhaled slowly and forced calm back into her voice. He was the only person who made me feel safe. Cassian looked at her carefully then, and for the first time, he understood why she guarded herself so fiercely from emotional closeness. Because once someone loses the person who protected them most, trusting the world again becomes terrifying. The night had grown colder by the time their conversation faded into silence again. Zahara sat quietly beside Cassian beneath the terrace lanterns, while his coat remained around her shoulders. Neither seemed ready to leave. Not yet. Cassian watched her carefully. The mansion saw Zahara as composed, disciplined, and emotionally distant, but tonight he saw exhaustion beneath her strength, the kind carried by people who survive too much alone. You know, he said softly, you spend so much time protecting yourself that I don't think anyone ever asks if you're tired. Zahara looked down slowly, because he was right. She was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of carrying grief quietly while powerful people lived comfortably around stolen truth. But she could not say any of that. Not yet. Cassian moved slightly closer. You deserve peace, he said quietly. The words nearly broke something inside her. Nobody had spoken to her with that kind of gentleness in years. Zahara finally looked at him. The distance between them suddenly felt fragile, dangerous. Cassian lifted one hand slowly, giving her enough time to move away if she wanted. She didn't. His fingers brushed softly against her hair before he leaned forward carefully and pressed a gentle kiss against her forehead. Nothing rushed, nothing demanding, just warmth, respect, safety. Zahara closed her eyes instantly. For one brief moment, the walls she spent years building weakened dangerously. Cassian stayed close enough for her to feel his breathing. You don't have to carry everything alone, he whispered. Zahara opened her eyes slowly. If he knew the truth about her, would he still look at her this way? Would he still touch her like something worth protecting? The questions frightened her, because somewhere between the late-night talks, the quiet walks, and the growing closeness between them, Zahara realized something she never planned for. She was falling in love with Cassian Darrow, and love was becoming the greatest threat to everything she came to the mansion to do. Long before Zahara wore gray uniforms and walked quietly through the Darrow mansion, she belonged to a completely different world, a world built by Oren Bellamy, her grandfather. Even now, years after his death, his presence still lived inside her memories more strongly than anything else. Some nights, Zahara sat awake in her small staff room, staring at the necklace hidden beneath her uniform, while memories returned so clearly they almost hurt. She remembered sitting inside Oren's office as a little girl while sunlight poured through the tall windows of Bellamy House headquarters. The office always smelled like coffee, old books, and cedar wood. Oren Bellamy never acted like a billionaire around her. He acted like family. While executives waited nervously outside his office doors, Zahara sat on the carpet beside him, fixing old music boxes or listening to stories about how he built Bellamy House from a tiny luxury workshop into one of the most respected brands in America. Never let wealth change the way you treat people, he always told her. He believed respect mattered more than power. That was why workers loved him. Bellamy House did not grow because Oren feared people. It grew because he valued them. When Zahara lost her parents at a young age, Oren became her entire world. He attended school events himself. He cooked breakfast during weekends despite having chefs. He remembered every small detail about her life. To the public, Oren Bellamy was a business legend. To Zahara, he was safety, the only person who made her feel completely protected. And that was why losing him destroyed more than her family. It destroyed the life she trusted. Even now, standing inside the Darrow mansion surrounded by lies and secrets, Zahara still heard his voice reminding her who she truly was beneath the disguise. A Bellamy, not a servant, not invisible. And one day, she intended to reclaim everything they stole from him. Bellamy House began with one small storefront in Chicago nearly 40 years earlier. Orrin Bellamy built it himself. No wealthy relatives, no powerful investors, just talent, discipline, and a refusal to compromise quality. What started as handcrafted luxury goods slowly became an international empire known for elegance, honesty, and craftsmanship. Celebrities wore Bellamy designs, luxury hotels partnered with Bellamy interiors. Wealthy families fought for invitations to Bellamy events. But despite the company's success, Orrin never trusted greed. That was why he prepared carefully for the future. When Zahara turned 19, Orrin invited her into his office late one evening after the headquarters closed for the night. She still remembered the nervous smile on his face. "I have something important for you," he said. He handed her a leather folder containing legal documents. Zahara frowned slightly while reading. Succession agreements, ownership shares, official transfer papers. Her eyes widened. "Grandfather," Orrin smiled softly, "Bellamy House belongs to you one day." Zahara looked stunned. "There are executives with more experience." "There are executives with more ambition," he corrected calmly. "That is exactly why I chose you." She sat quietly while he continued speaking. "You understand people. You listen before speaking. And unlike many people around us, you know wealth means nothing if kindness disappears." Tears burned behind Zahara's eyes that night, not because of money, because someone believed in her so completely. Orrin placed one hand gently over hers. "The world will try convincing you powerful people deserve everything they take," he warned. "Never believe that." At the time, Zahara thought he was simply giving advice. Now she understood. Orrin already feared the people surrounding his company, and before his death, he tried desperately to protect her from them. Everything changed the day Orrin Bellamy died. The warmth inside Bellamy House disappeared almost immediately. Executives who once smiled respectfully around Zahara suddenly looked at her differently. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Lawyers delayed meetings. Important files became difficult to access. At first, Zahara believed grief simply changed people. Then, she noticed the lies. One senior executive claimed Orrin planned to restructure ownership before his death. Another insisted the company needed experienced leadership during uncertain times. Meetings happened without her knowledge. Documents vanished. People she trusted stopped answering calls. Within weeks, Bellamy House no longer felt like her grandfather's company. It felt occupied. Zahara fought back at first. She requested legal reviews, demanded access to company records, questioned sudden transfer approvals, but every attempt met another wall. "You're emotional right now. You're too young to manage this responsibility. The board only wants stability." The excuses sounded polite. The betrayal underneath them was not. Then, the media stories started. Anonymous sources described Zahara as unstable after her grandfather's death. Business articles suggested she lacked leadership ability. Investors quietly distanced themselves from her. Someone was destroying her credibility carefully before she could fight properly. And the worst part? Many people believed it, because wealthy men in expensive suits sounded more trustworthy than a grieving young woman. One night, Zahara entered Bellamy House headquarters and found her office access revoked completely. Security escorted her out politely while executives avoided eye contact upstairs. She stood outside the building in freezing rain, staring at the company her grandfather built with his own hands. The company promised to her, the company stolen from her. That night broke something inside her permanently, not because she lost wealth, because powerful people proved how quickly they erased someone once profit became more important than loyalty. And from that moment forward, Zahara stopped trusting appearances completely. For almost a year after losing Bellamy House, Zahara searched quietly for proof. Most people assumed she disappeared completely. That helped her. The fewer people watching her, the easier it became to investigate privately. At first, she believed Bellamy executives acted alone, but pieces of information slowly pointed toward something larger: private investors, political connections, hidden financial agreements. Then, one name appeared repeatedly inside old legal correspondence: Odette Darrow. The discovery stunned Zahara completely. At first, she refused believing it. Why would the Darrow family involve themselves in Bellamy House? But the evidence kept growing. One former legal assistant secretly contacted Zahara late one evening and agreed to meet privately in exchange for anonymity. During the meeting, he handed her photocopies from archive transfer files. Zahara still remembered the exact moment she saw it. Odette Darrow's signature, clear, undeniable, attached to financial approvals connected to Bellamy House restructuring shortly after Oren's death. Her hands shook while reading. Odette was not merely connected. She helped legitimize the takeover. The realization changed everything. Suddenly, Zahara understood why certain records disappeared so completely. Powerful families protected each other behind closed doors. The Bellamy executives gained influence. The Darrows gained financial leverage, and Zahara lost everything. But one detail inside the files mattered most. Several original documents remained stored privately rather than publicly filed, meaning somewhere, physical proof still existed. Proof powerful enough to expose everyone involved. The final clue pointed toward the Darrow estate archives. From that moment forward, Zahara stopped searching broadly. She focused on one goal only: get inside the Darrow mansion, find the missing records, expose the truth, even if it meant standing inside the home of the woman who helped destroy her family. Becoming a maid was never part of Zahara's old life, but it became necessary. After tracing the missing Bellamy records to the Darrow estate, Zahara realized powerful people would never allow her inside openly as Oren Bellamy's granddaughter. So she entered another way, quietly, invisible. She spent weeks studying staff hiring agencies connected to the mansion before applying under limited references and altered personal history. Wealthy families rarely investigated domestic staff deeply unless trouble appeared. Odette certainly didn't. To people like her, workers existed beneath suspicion. That arrogance became Zahara's advantage. The first weeks inside the mansion focused entirely on observation. She memorized schedules, room access, security patterns, and archive locations carefully. She learned which staff feared Odette most, which lawyers visited privately, which hallways remained restricted. And slowly, the pieces connected. Every suspicious conversation pulled her closer toward the truth. Every locked cabinet increased her certainty. The missing documents existed somewhere inside the estate. She felt it. Still, living inside the mansion became harder than expected. Not because of Odette, because of Cassian. He complicated everything. Zahara never planned emotional attachment. Her mission required distance, discipline, and secrecy. Instead, she found herself sharing quiet conversations beneath midnight skies with the son of the woman she came to expose. That irony felt almost cruel. Some nights, Zahara stood outside the archive hallway, reminding herself why she entered the mansion at all. Justice, not comfort, not romance, justice. But every day Cassian treated her with kindness. Her resolve became harder to separate from her feelings, and feelings made dangerous missions even more dangerous. The closer Zahara grew to Cassian, the heavier the truth became. At first, hiding her identity felt practical, necessary. Now it felt personal. That frightened her more than anything else. One evening after another late-night walk through the gardens, Zahara returned to her room unable to sleep. Cassian's words still echoed inside her mind. "You don't have to carry everything alone." If only he knew. She sat on the edge of her bed staring at the hidden Bellamy documents spread carefully beneath the dim bedside lamp. Every page represented betrayal. Every signature connected his family to her pain. And somewhere inside, all of it, stood Cassian. A man she no longer wanted to hurt. That was the problem. Zahara trusted him now, not fully, but enough to fear losing him. She imagined the moment he eventually discovered the truth, that she entered his home under false identity, that every conversation between them began while she secretly searched for evidence against his family. Would he feel manipulated, used? Would kindness disappear from his eyes the second he learned she lied? The thought hurt more than expected, because despite everything, Cassian remained innocent in many ways. He did not build the corruption surrounding Bellamy House. He did not steal her inheritance, yet he carried the Darrow name, and sooner or later, loyalty would force him to choose a side. Zahara lowered her head into trembling hands briefly. For years, revenge felt simple. Now, emotions complicated everything. Because somewhere between the library storm, the terrace conversations, and the quiet moments nobody else saw, she fell in love with the one man connected to the family she came to destroy. And deep down, Zahara feared one painful truth most of all. When Cassian finally learned who she really was, he might never look at her the same way again. Zahara waited until the mansion settled into silence before making her move. The staff quarters were quiet. The kitchen had been cleaned. The last guard had already passed the lower corridor. She counted the seconds between footsteps the same way she had practiced for weeks. Tonight, she could not afford fear. Odette's private archives sat behind a narrow hallway near the west wing, guarded by cameras and a coded lock. Zahara had studied that door for days. She knew when the camera turned. She knew when the guard paused by the staircase to check his phone. She knew which floorboard near the hall made noise under pressure. She wore soft shoes and carried a folded towel over one arm in case anyone stopped her. A maid with laundry raised fewer questions than a woman moving through restricted rooms after midnight. When she reached the hallway, her heart beat hard, but her face stayed calm. She waited until the camera shifted toward the opposite corner before stepping forward. The lock glowed faintly. Zahara removed a small card she'd copied from Odette's assistant earlier that week. She pressed it against the panel. 1 second, 2 seconds. The light turned green. The door clicked open. Zahara slipped inside and closed it carefully behind her. The archive room smelled of leather files, old paper, and secrets. Tall cabinets lined the walls. Boxes sat neatly on shelves with dates written in black ink. Odette had kept everything organized. That made Zahara's task easier. She moved quickly to the section marked Private Acquisitions and began searching. Bellamy. She needed that name. Her fingers moved across folders until one label stopped her breathing. Bellamy House, Confidential. Zahara pulled it free with shaking hands. At last, she had reached the room that held the truth. Zahara placed the Bellamy folder on the archive table and opened it carefully. Inside sat years of stolen history. Letters, receipts, board notes, private transfer records. Her grandfather's name appeared again and again across the documents. Each page felt like a wound reopening, but she forced herself to keep reading. One letter came from a Bellamy House executive dated 2 weeks after Oren's death. It thanked Odette Darrow for her strategic cooperation during the transition. Zahara's hand tightened around the paper. Transition. That was what they called theft when rich people wrote it politely. Another file showed shares moved through holding companies connected to the Darrow family. The numbers matched the old copies Zahara had received from the former legal assistant, but these were originals, cleaner, stronger, impossible to dismiss. She photographed every page with her phone. Her breath grew uneven when she found a sealed envelope hidden beneath the final stack. It had no label on the front, only Odette's initials written in dark ink. Zahara opened it. A legal agreement rested inside. The agreement stated that Odette Darrow supported the private transfer of Bellamy House, controlling interest after Oren's death. In exchange, Darrow-linked accounts gained access to a special investment channel tied to the company's expansion. Zahara stared at the page. There it was, the missing link. The reason Odette helped bury her: money, influence, power, not family loyalty, not business necessity, greed. Zahara fought back tears as she copied the agreement and folded the original back into place. Her grandfather had trusted people who saw his life's work as an opportunity. Now, Zahara held proof. But proof alone was not enough. She needed the right moment, and Odette was giving her one. The charity gala. Zahara had just returned the folder to its place when footsteps sounded outside the archive door. She froze. Not a guard. The steps were too steady, too familiar. Cassian. Her chest tightened as the handle shifted. Zahara moved quickly behind a tall cabinet just as the door opened. Cassian stepped inside, holding a file in one hand. He looked tired, still dressed from a late meeting, his tie loose around his neck. "Mother?" he called softly. No answer. Zahara held her breath. Cassian entered farther, scanning the room. His eyes passed over the cabinets, the table, the files. 1 second longer, and he would see her. A loose paper on the table moved slightly from the air near the door. Cassian noticed. He walked toward it. Zahara's heart slammed hard against her ribs. His hand reached for the paper. At that moment, noise came from the hallway. A guard's radio crackled. Cassian looked back toward the door. Zahara used that tiny opening to move from behind the cabinet toward the side exit leading to the service corridor. She moved softly, barely breathing. But as she reached the exit, Cassian turned. Their eyes met. For one painful second, neither spoke. His face changed first. Shock, confusion, hurt. "Zahara," she could not explain. Not there, not with Bellamy proof hidden beneath her apron. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Before he could step closer, she slipped through the side door and vanished into the servant hallway. Cassian stood alone inside the archive room. The woman he trusted had been hiding inside his mother's private records. And the crack between them began with one unanswered question. Who was Zahara really? By morning, the mansion had changed. Odette moved through the halls with cold purpose, giving orders to assistants, decorators, and security staff. The Darrow Charity Gala was only days away, but she acted as if the entire family future depended on it. To her, it did. She planned to announce Cassian's engagement to Celine Vey in front of the city's elite. No private discussion, no escape, no room for refusal. A public announcement would pressure Cassian into obedience and show every wealthy family that the Darrow name remained untouched by weakness. In the breakfast room, Odette slid a printed program across the table toward Cassian. His eyes stopped on the final page. Engagement announcement, Cassian Darrow and Celine Vey. He looked up slowly. "You wrote this without speaking to me." Odette poured tea as if he had asked about weather. "You have delayed long enough." "I never agreed." "You will." Cassian's voice hardened. "That is not your decision." Odette finally looked at him. When a family carries influence, personal feelings become secondary. Cassian pushed the program back toward her. "I am not marrying Celine to satisfy your donors." Odette's expression stayed controlled, but anger sharpened her eyes. "You are confused right now because a servant has made you sentimental." Cassian stood. "Do not bring Zahara into this." "That girl is already in it," Odette said coldly. "More than she should be." Cassian went still. The words felt loaded. Odette gave him a final look. "At the gala, you will stand beside Celine. You will smile. You will protect this family." Cassian left without answering. But Odette had already decided. If Cassian would not choose the proper future, privately, she would force it publicly. Zahara heard about the engagement announcement from 2 staff members arranging flowers in the East Hall. Cassian Darrow and Celine Vey. Official. Public. At the charity gala. The words struck her harder than she wanted to admit. She stood in the hallway holding folded linens while the women spoke excitedly about Celine's gown, Odette's plans, and how grand the announcement would look in the newspapers. Zahara kept walking before anyone noticed her face. Inside her room, she locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the copies hidden beneath the floorboard. The evidence was ready. Letters, transfer records, the agreement, Odette's signature. Everything Zahara needed to expose the truth sat within reach. So why did she feel like her heart was breaking? Cassian had not promised her anything. He owed her nothing, and she had hidden so much from him that pain felt almost selfish. Still, she remembered the terrace, his coat around her shoulders, his voice telling her she deserved peace. the way he looked at her like she mattered before knowing her name carried power. Now he would stand beside Celine while the city applauded. Maybe that was better. Maybe it would make revealing the truth easier. Zahara wiped a tear before it fully fell. No more weakness. She opened her journal and wrote a careful plan for the gala, where reporters would stand, when Odette would speak, how to present the documents clearly, how to protect the originals. This was no longer only about reclaiming Bellamy House. It was about honoring Oren. It was about every worker Odette had treated like they were beneath her. Zahara pressed one hand over the documents. Love had confused her path, but truth would guide her next step. Cassian spent the night before the gala inside his father's old study. The room still carried traces of the man he missed, a worn leather chair, a shelf of old journals, and the repaired music box Zahara had brought back to life. He wound the key gently. The melody filled the room. For once, he did not think about Odette's demands first. He thought about his father. His father had not been perfect, but he had been warm. He remembered birthdays. He listened. He treated staff by their names. He loved quietly, but honestly. Cassian wondered what his father would say if he saw him now, trapped between duty and a life he did not want. Selene was not cruel. She was not the enemy. But marrying her would be another polished lie added to the Darrow name. He could not do it, not to himself, not to her, not to Zahara, even if Zahara had secrets he did not understand. His mind returned to the archive room, her frightened eyes, her whispered apology. He knew she was hiding something serious. He also knew fear had placed that secret between them. Cassian did not know whether he could trust her completely yet, but he knew he trusted one thing, how he felt around her, seen, human, free. He picked up the gala program from his desk and stared at the printed engagement line. His mother had already made the decision for him in ink. Cassian tore the page slowly in half. The sound felt final. At the gala, Odette expected obedience. Celine expected an announcement. The city expected a perfect Darrow heir. But Cassian had made his choice. He would not marry for status. He would not trade his life for applause. And by tomorrow night, everyone would know it. The Darrow Charity Gala began like a royal celebration. Black cars lined the entrance of the Grand Darrow Hotel, while cameras flashed endlessly across polished marble stairs. Reporters called out names as wealthy guests stepped onto the red carpet wearing designer gowns, diamond jewelry, and carefully practiced smiles. Inside, the ballroom looked almost unreal. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light across hundreds of guests, while violin music drifted softly through the massive hall. Politicians stood beside celebrities. Investors shook hands with old money families. Champagne moved endlessly between tables covered in white roses and silver candlelight. Every corner of the room displayed power. And at the center of it all stood Odette Darrow. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect control. She welcomed guests personally while photographers captured every polished moment. Tonight was meant to strengthen the Darrow legacy publicly after weeks of tension, inside the mansion. But beneath the glamour, pressure sat heavily in the air. Cassian arrived late. The moment he entered the ballroom, conversations shifted toward him immediately. He wore a black tailored suit that made him look every bit like the future heir the city expected. Only Zahara noticed the exhaustion behind his eyes. She stood near the serving staff dressed once again in her gray uniform, holding a silver tray while pretending calm she no longer felt. Her heart beat painfully against the hidden documents secured beneath the fabric of her apron. Tonight changed everything. Around her, reporters discussed rumors of a major family announcement. Investors whispered about the future merger between the Darrows and the Vey family. Nobody looked twice at the maid standing quietly near the champagne tower. Nobody knew the woman they ignored carried enough truth to destroy the room around them. Then, Celine Vey entered beside Odette. The applause began immediately, and Zahara realized the moment she feared most had finally arrived. Odette moved through the ballroom with complete confidence. To every guest watching, she looked untouchable, the perfect social queen. The woman who built influence through discipline and elegance. But inside, Odette focused on only one goal: secure Cassian's future publicly before he could resist privately again. She guided Celine carefully from table to table while introducing her as if the engagement already existed. Celine has always understood family values, Odette told one investor smoothly. Another guest smiled warmly. She already looks like a Darrow. Celine accepted every compliment with controlled grace. Her emerald gown shimmered beneath the ballroom lights while reporters followed her movements eagerly. Tonight positioned her exactly where she always intended to stand, beside Cassian, near power. But Cassian barely touched his champagne. His attention drifted constantly toward the edges of the room, toward Zahara. Odette noticed every glance. Her irritation deepened quietly. At one point, she pulled Cassian aside near the stage before the announcement began. "You will stand beside Celine tonight," she said sharply beneath her smile. Cassian looked at her calmly. "You planned this without my consent. I planned what is best for this family." "You planned control." Odette's eyes hardened instantly. "You are behaving emotionally because of a servant." Cassian's voice lowered dangerously. "Stop speaking about her like that." Odette stared at him in disbelief. Even now, even with the entire city watching. His loyalty still leaned toward Zahara. That only strengthened Odette's resolve. Across the ballroom, Zahara watched silently while adjusting champagne glasses near the stage. She saw the tension between mother and son clearly. She also saw something else. Cassian looked trapped, and for one painful moment, Zahara almost wanted to leave the ballroom before destroying everything. But then she remembered Oren Bellamy, the company stolen from him, the lies, the betrayal, and her hesitation disappeared again. The orchestra softened as Odette stepped onto the ballroom stage. Conversations faded instantly. Every camera turned toward her. Guests lifted champagne glasses while waiting for another polished Darrow speech about charity, influence, and legacy. Odette smiled flawlessly beneath the chandelier lights. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," she began warmly. "This evening celebrates generosity, unity, and the future." Applause followed immediately. Cassian stood beside the stage with Selena nearby, his expression unreadable. Odette continued speaking confidently about family partnerships and shared values before finally arriving at the moment she wanted most. "And tonight," she announced proudly, "our family wishes to celebrate something deeply personal as well." The ballroom brightened with excitement. Reporters raised cameras higher. Celine looked toward Cassian expectantly. Odette extended one elegant hand toward them both. "The future union between the Darrow and Vey families represents—" "No." The single word cut through the ballroom sharply. Silence crashed across the room. Odette slowly turned toward her son. Cassian stepped forward calmly, his voice steady despite hundreds of eyes fixed on him. "I'm not doing this." The tension became immediate. Guests exchanged shocked whispers. Celine's face lost color slightly. Odette's smile tightened dangerously. "Cassian." "I respect Celine," he continued firmly, "but I will not stand here pretending a planned marriage equals love." The room froze completely now. Odette lowered her voice. "You are embarrassing this family." Cassian looked directly at her. "No," he said quietly. "I'm refusing to live like a business arrangement." A reporter near the front nearly dropped his pen. Celine stood painfully still beside the stage while cameras flashed around her. Odette stepped closer. "You would throw away everything your family built because of emotion?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "I won't build my life on pride," he answered. The sentence shattered the perfect image Odette worked years creating, and somewhere near the back of the ballroom, Zahara stared at him with stunned eyes. Because despite everything at risk around him, Cassian still chose honesty. Odette's control snapped quietly behind her smile. She looked across the ballroom slowly until her eyes landed on Zahara standing near the serving tables. Cold fury sharpened instantly across her face. "This," Odette said sharply, "is because of her." The room followed her gaze immediately. Zahara stood still beneath hundreds of eyes, suddenly focused on her. Reporters turned cameras toward the Maid now. Confused whispers spread quickly across the ballroom. Odette stepped down from the stage carefully. Every movement looked graceful. Every word carried poison. You've become distracted, she told Cassian loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. You've allowed someone beneath this family to cloud your judgment. Cassian's expression darkened instantly. Stop. But Odette ignored him completely. She approached Zahara slowly while wealthy guests watched with open curiosity. You entered this house wearing a servant's uniform, Odette said coldly. Do not mistake kindness for equality. Zahara kept her posture calm even while humiliation burned through her chest. Odette smiled without warmth. Girls like you always become dangerous when wealthy men pay attention to them. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Others watched eagerly. Cassian stepped forward immediately. Enough. Odette raised one hand sharply toward him. She's nothing but a maid. The sentence echoed through the ballroom exactly the way it had during the private dinner. Only tonight, the audience was larger, crueler, more public. Zahara felt every eye pressing against her, but something inside her changed then. No more silence, no more hiding, no more surviving quietly while powerful people rewrote the truth. Odette expected shame, fear, retreat. Instead, Zahara slowly lifted her head, and for the first time since entering the Darrow mansion, she looked directly at Odette without lowering her eyes afterward. The room felt the shift instantly. Even Cassian noticed it, because suddenly the maid no longer looked invisible. She looked dangerous. Zahara stepped away from the serving table slowly. The ballroom remained completely silent, except for the distant sound of cameras clicking nervously. Odette folded her arms with cold confidence. Have you forgotten your place? Zahara looked directly at her. My place was never beneath you, Mrs. Darrow. Gasps spread immediately across nearby tables. Cassian froze. Celine stared openly now. Odette laughed softly, though tension showed clearly beneath her expression. And who exactly do you think you are? For months, Zahara imagined this moment countless times, in anger, in grief, in fear. But standing beneath the ballroom lights now, she felt strangely calm. Slowly, she reached into her apron and removed the sealed document folder. The room leaned toward her almost collectively. Then, Zahara spoke clearly. My name is Zahara Bellamy. Shock exploded instantly. Several guests whispered Bellamy House beneath their breath. Reporters surged closer toward the stage. One elderly investor nearly stood from his chair completely. Cassian stared at her like the ground beneath him had shifted. Everything suddenly made sense. The intelligence, the grace, the hidden sadness. Odette's face lost color. That's impossible, she snapped. Zahara stepped forward another pace. No, she answered calmly. What's impossible is pretending you didn't know exactly who my grandfather was when you signed agreements tied to his company. The ballroom erupted into louder whispers. Celine slowly stepped backward from the stage entirely. Zahara opened the folder carefully and removed the documents. Orrin Bellamy named me legal successor to Bellamy House before his death, she announced. After he died, executives worked together to erase my position and seize control. Her eyes locked onto Odette. And your signature helped them do it. For the first time in years, Odette Darrow looked genuinely afraid. Zahara held up the documents while cameras flashed endlessly around the ballroom. Every guest watched in stunned silence now. No one cared about the engagement anymore. The room belonged entirely to her. These are original transfer agreements connected to Bellamy House, Zahara said firmly. They prove private financial cooperation between Darrow-linked accounts and the executives who removed me from my grandfather's company. Odette stepped forward sharply. Those documents are stolen. They are evidence. Cassian looked between Zahara and his mother slowly. His breathing had changed, uneven, because deep down, he already knew Zahara was telling the truth. Zahara removed another document carefully. This agreement carries Odette Darrow's authorization, approving emergency restructuring immediately after Orrin Bellamy's death. She held the signature high enough for nearby reporters to photograph clearly. Flash after flash exploded across the ballroom. Odette's voice sharpened. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Then, Zahara revealed the final item, a small recording device. The ballroom quieted completely again. My grandfather recorded this weeks before he died, she said softly. Cassian's chest tightened instantly. Zahara pressed play. Orrin Bellamy's voice filled the ballroom, older, tired, but unmistakably clear. "If anything happens to me," the recording said, "Bellamy House belongs to my granddaughter, Zahara Bellamy. She is my chosen successor. Any attempt to remove her from the company goes against my direct wishes." Silence followed. Heavy. Devastating. Several guests stared openly at Odette now, not with admiration, with suspicion. Cassian closed his eyes briefly, because in one single moment, the perfect Darrow image collapsed completely. And standing at the center of the destruction was the woman everyone dismissed as nothing but a maid. Zahara looked toward Odette one final time. "You taught this room to overlook people without power," she said quietly. "That was your mistake." Cassian stepped slowly toward Zahara's side, not toward his mother, toward her. And the ballroom understood what that meant immediately. If truth destroyed your family's perfect image, would you still speak it? The ballroom remained silent after Orrin Bellamy's recording ended. Cassian stood beside Zahara, but his heart felt pulled in two painful directions. He believed her. That was the first truth. The documents, the signatures, the agreement, the recording, all of it exposed what his mother had helped bury. Zahara had not entered the Darrow mansion by chance. She came with a purpose, a wound, and a secret large enough to destroy everything around them. But belief did not remove the hurt. Cassian looked at her, searching the face he had grown to trust during quiet nights, garden walks, and conversations no one else heard. "You knew this the whole time?" he asked softly. Zahara's eyes filled with pain. "Not everything, but enough to know I had to find proof." "You came here because of my mother?" "Yes." His jaw tightened, not from anger alone, but from the ache of realizing every tender moment had lived beside a hidden mission. The tea, the library, the terrace, the kiss on her forehead. He wondered where truth ended and secrecy began. Zahara saw the question in his eyes before he spoke it. "I never planned to care about you," she whispered. That hurt him more. Cassian looked toward Odette, whose face had hardened into panic, denial, and rage. For the first time, he saw the world Zahara had been fighting alone, a world where power erased people, a world where trust became dangerous. His voice softened. "You were afraid," Zahara nodded once. "I didn't know who would protect me, and who would protect the Darrow name." Cassian closed his eyes briefly. He hated the lie, but he understood the fear behind it. Odette Darrow did not collapse easily. Even with cameras pointed toward her and guests whispering across the ballroom, she tried to rebuild control with the one weapon she trusted most: authority. She stepped forward, chin lifted, eyes sharp. "This is a disgraceful performance," she said, her voice steady enough to fool anyone who did not know her. "A former employee has stolen private documents and twisted them for attention." Zahara did not move. Cassian watched his mother carefully. Odette turned to the reporters. "None of this has been verified. These papers mean nothing without legal review." One reporter called from the front, "Mrs. Darrow, is that your signature on the agreement?" Odette's eyes flashed. "I sign hundreds of documents each year." Another reporter raised a phone. The recording named Zahara Bellamy as successor. "Did your family benefit from the transfer?" Odette's smile tightened into something brittle. "My family has always supported ethical business." A murmur moved through the room. This time, it did not favor her. Zahara opened the folder again and removed the clearest record. She held it toward the nearest reporter. "This document shows Darrow-linked accounts received financial access after Bellamy House changed control. The date is 3 days after my grandfather's burial." The room fell colder. Odette's denial had nothing firm to stand on now. Her words sounded polished. Zahara's proof sounded final. Cassian stared at the page and felt shame settle heavily inside him, not for what he had done, but for what his name had covered. Odette snapped, "Cassian, say something." He looked at her. For the first time in his life, silence felt stronger than obedience. Celine Vey stood near the stage, frozen beneath the lights. Only minutes earlier, she believed the worst humiliation of the night would be Cassian refusing the engagement. Now she understood the room had moved far beyond a broken social arrangement. This was not about jealousy. This was not about a maid winning attention. This was a scandal tied to stolen inheritance, buried records, and a powerful woman caught by the person she had dismissed. Celine looked at Zahara differently now. For weeks she had viewed her as a quiet threat, a servant who held Cassian's attention without trying, a woman who made him softer in ways Celine could not. But standing there with documents in her hands, Zahara no longer looked like a rival. She looked like someone who had survived a war no one else could see. Celine slowly removed the engagement bracelet Odette had asked her to wear that evening. It had not been officially announced, but everyone close to the family knew what it meant. She placed it on a nearby table. Odette noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Celine's voice stayed calm. "Stepping away." Odette's face tightened. "This is not the time." "No," Celine said quietly. "This is exactly the time." The ballroom watched her now, too. Celine looked toward Cassian. "I wanted the future your mother promised. I won't pretend otherwise." Cassian gave her a respectful nod. Celine looked toward Zahara next. "But I won't stand beside a lie to protect my pride." For the first time that night, Zahara felt no anger toward Celine, only understanding. Celine turned and walked away from the stage, leaving Odette with one less shield. The gala ended before midnight, but the story reached the public long before dawn. Reporters moved quickly. Photos of Zahara holding the Bellamy documents spread across news sites within minutes. Clips of Oren Bellamy's recording appeared online. Headlines questioned Odette's role in the transfer. Business commentators began naming executives once praised as saviors of Bellamy House. By morning, the Darrow mansion no longer felt untouchable. Phones rang non-stop. Lawyers arrived through side entrances. Staff whispered in corners. Odette stayed locked inside her office, surrounded by advisors who could no longer protect the family image with simple statements. Outside the gates, reporters waited with eye, cameras and microphones. Inside, Cassian watched the news coverage from the drawing room, his face drawn with exhaustion. Every new report added another piece. Old board changes, strange share movements, silent resignations after Oren's death, Zahara's sudden removal from company records. The truth had been hidden for years, but once exposed, it spread faster than anyone inside the Darrow house could control. Zahara stood near the window, listening to a reporter describe her as the missing heir of Bellamy House. The words felt strange. For years she had lived as a ghost inside her own story. Now the world spoke her name again. Cassian approached slowly but kept a respectful distance. "You did it," he said. Zahara looked at the reporters beyond the gates. "No," she answered softly. "My grandfather did. I only carried his truth into the room." Cassian watched her profile quietly. She had won the first battle, but victory had not made her lighter. It had only made the cost visible. By afternoon, Odette summoned Cassian to the main study. He expected anger. He found something colder. Odette stood behind the desk, surrounded by lawyers, crisis advisors, and printed statements waiting for approval. When Cassian entered, every conversation stopped. Odette held out one document. "You will release this statement," she said. Cassian did not take it. "What does it say?" "That you were misled by Zahara Bellamy during an emotional attachment, that you support a full legal review, but reject her public accusations against this family." Cassian stared at her. The room seemed to shrink around him. "You want me to call her a liar. I want you to protect your name." "My name," he repeated quietly. Odette stepped closer. "The Darrow name is all you have." Cassian looked at the walls, the portraits, the polished shelves, the empire built on control. For years he believed losing the family image meant losing himself. Now he saw the truth. The image had been the thing holding him hostage. He pushed the statement back onto the desk. "No," Odette's face hardened. "Think carefully." "I am." His voice stayed calm. "I will not defend theft because my last name benefits from silence." One lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Odette whispered, "You would choose her over your own mother?" Cassian looked directly at her. I choose justice over pride." The words changed the room. Odette's eyes filled with fury, but Cassian no longer bowed under it. He walked out of the study without signing anything. For the first time, he did not feel like a Darrow heir escaping duty. He felt like a man choosing his own soul. Cassian found Zahara in the garden later that evening. The same fountain stood between them, where he had once apologized after Odette's first public insult. But this time, the silence felt different. He had chosen justice. He had stood against his mother. He had refused to protect the lie. Still, Zahara knew love did not become whole in a single brave moment. Cassian stopped a few steps away. "I refuse the statement," he said. Zahara looked at him. "You didn't have to do that for me. I didn't do it only for you. I did it because it was right." Her eyes softened, but sadness remained. Cassian noticed. "You still think I hate you?" Zahara looked down. "I think I hurt you." He exhaled slowly. "You did." The honesty struck her harder than anger. Cassian continued, "But I understand why you hid the truth. Understanding doesn't erase the pain overnight." Zahara nodded, fighting tears. "I wanted to tell you so many times. I know. I was afraid. I know that too." The fountain water moved softly between them. Cassian stepped closer, but he did not reach for her. That restraint mattered. It told Zahara he understood trust needed space, not pressure. "I care about you," he said, "but we have to rebuild what secrecy damaged." Zahara's voice trembled. "Do you still want to?" Cassian looked at her with quiet certainty. "Yes." For the first time since the gala, Zahara breathed without fear. Love had survived the truth, but healing would require patience, honesty, and the courage to stop hiding. Zahara returned to Bellamy House through the front doors. No maid uniform, no lowered head, no borrowed name. This time, cameras. Waited outside, lawyers walked beside her, and the board members who once ignored her could no longer pretend she did not exist. Inside the company lobby, employees stood quietly along the marble floor. Some looked nervous, some looked hopeful. Others looked ashamed because they remembered how quickly people had accepted the lie about her years ago. Zahara did not enter with anger. She entered with grace. Her grandfather's portrait still hung above the main staircase. For a moment, she stopped beneath it and looked up at his face. "I came back," she whispered. The boardroom meeting lasted hours. Executives tried to protect themselves with polished excuses. Some claimed they had misunderstood the documents. Others blamed old legal teams. A few tried to suggest Zahara should avoid public conflict for the sake of the brand. Zahara listened quietly. Then she placed Oren's final recording on the table. "No more hiding behind language," she said. "No more using paperwork to erase people. Bellamy House will return to the values my grandfather built it on." By the end of the week, the leadership structure changed. The executives who participated in the takeover were removed or suspended pending legal review. The company issued a public apology. Zahara's rightful position was restored, but she refused to smile for victory photos that made pain look simple. Because this was not a triumph built on revenge. It was a return, a correction, a promise kept to a man who believed kindness and power could exist in the same room. Zahara stood in Oren's old office that evening, looking over the city. For the first time in years, she did not feel erased. She felt restored. Zahara's first major decision as leader shocked the board. She did not begin with a luxury campaign. She did not begin with investor dinners. She began with the workers, the cleaners, the assistants, the warehouse team, the junior designers, the reception staff who greeted wealthy clients with smiles while being treated like background noise. She called a company-wide meeting and stood before everyone without a script. "My grandfather built Bellamy House with people," she said. "Not just products, not just numbers, people." The room stayed silent. Many workers had heard promises from leaders before. They knew rich speeches often disappeared once cameras left. Zahara understood that. So she backed her words with action. She ordered a full review of staff wages. She created a confidential system for reporting workplace mistreatment. She restored benefits cut by the previous leadership. She opened training programs for workers who wanted to move into design, management, or finance. One elderly seamstress cried when Zahara personally thanked her for 32 years of service. A young assistant stared in disbelief when Zahara asked her opinion during a product meeting. The company atmosphere changed slowly but clearly. People stood straighter, spoke more freely, worked with pride instead of fear. Zahara also redesigned Bellamy House's public image. She kept the elegance but removed the arrogance. Campaigns began highlighting the hands behind the craft, not only the faces buying it. Critics called it risky, investors called it too emotional, Zahara called it justice. She knew what it felt like to be reduced to a uniform. She knew what it felt like to be looked through by people who believed status made them superior. So she built a company where no one had to beg to be seen. Bellamy House did not lose value. It gained meaning. Odette Darrow's fall happened quietly at first. Invitations stopped arriving. Board members stopped returning calls. Charity committees removed her name from leadership pages with polite statements about new directions. The same wealthy families who once waited for her approval now crossed rooms to avoid being photographed beside her. Odette had spent a lifetime building influence on fear, image, and control. Once the truth came out, those things turned fragile. Public investigations continued. Legal teams reviewed the Darrow family's role in the Bellamy House transfer. Former partners began protecting themselves. Old allies became careful strangers. For the first time, Odette learned what it meant to stand in a room where people saw risk instead of power. Many expected Zahara to attack her publicly. Reporters asked pointed questions. "Do you want Odette Darrow punished? Do you plan to destroy the Darrow name? Do you feel she deserves humiliation?" Zahara answered calmly. "I want accountability, not revenge." That answer stunned people more than anger would have. Privately, Cassian asked her why she refused to strike harder when Odette had shown her no mercy. Zahara looked through the glass wall of her office, watching workers leave for the evening. "People who use power to crush others already live inside their own punishment," she said. "I won't let her turn my healing into another version of her cruelty." Cassian understood then. Zahara's strength was not only in exposing the truth, it was in refusing to become bitter after pain tried to shape her. Odette lost influence. Zahara kept her dignity. And in the end, dignity spoke louder. 3 months later, Cassian visited Bellamy House on a quiet afternoon. He arrived without cameras, without security drama, and without the Darrow confidence people expected from him. At reception, he gave his name politely. The young receptionist smiled. "Ms. Bellamy is expecting you." Cassian took the elevator to the top floor, carrying a small box wrapped in dark blue paper. When the doors opened, he stepped into a space filled with warmth, plants, sunlight, framed designs, and quiet purpose. It felt nothing like the Darrow mansion. No cold silence, no forced perfection, no fear hidden behind polished walls. Zahara's office sat at the end of the hall. The door was open. She stood near the window, speaking with 2 young designers about a new collection. Her voice was calm, confident, and steady. Cassian paused at the doorway. For a moment, he simply watched her. Not the maid from the mansion, not the hidden heir fighting for proof, the woman herself. When Zahara turned and saw him, her expression softened. "Cassian," he smiled slightly. "Zahara." The designers left, giving them privacy. Cassian stepped inside and handed her the box. She opened it carefully. Inside sat the repaired music box from the Darrow East hallway. Zahara looked up in surprise. Cassian's voice softened. "It belonged to my father. You brought its song back once. I thought it belonged somewhere honest now." Zahara touched the wooden lid gently. The memory between them returned, quiet and tender. For the first time in months, neither spoke about scandal. They simply stood together, no disguise between them. Zahara placed the music box on her desk and wound the key. The soft melody filled the office. Cassian stood near the window, listening with a faint sadness in his eyes. "I used to think truth would fix everything once it came out," Zahara said. Cassian looked at her. "Did it?" "It freed me," she answered, "but it did not erase what I hid from you." He nodded slowly. No, it didn't. The honesty did not wound her this time. It steadied her. Zahara stepped closer. I was afraid you would choose your mother. I almost feared the same thing, Cassian admitted. Not because I believed she was right, because I spent my life obeying her voice before I learned to trust my own. Zahara's eyes softened. That took courage. So did walking into my family's home alone. She looked down briefly. I lied to you. You protected yourself. I still should have told you sooner. Cassian did not rush to comfort her with easy words. Instead, he gave her truth. Yes, you should have. Zahara accepted it. That was healing too, not pretending pain had no cost. Cassian stepped closer. But I also know you were fighting people who had already stolen your safety. Trust was not easy for you. Her voice lowered. I want to learn it again. With me, she looked up at him. With you. Slowly. Honestly. Cassian reached for her hand. He did not pull. He waited. Zahara placed her hand in his. This time, there was no secret mission between them. Only two wounded people choosing truth over fear. Weeks passed, and Zahara stopped living like someone waiting for loss. She no longer walked with her head lowered. She no longer entered rooms calculating where to disappear. She no longer softened her voice to make powerful people comfortable. Bellamy House became her second heartbeat. Every morning she entered the building knowing her grandfather's dream lived again. But this time, under her care. Cassian remained part of her life, but not as a savior. That mattered. He supported her without trying to control her. He stood beside her without speaking over her. He loved her with patience, not pressure. Their relationship grew through honesty. Some days were tender, some conversations were hard, but neither of them ran from truth anymore. One evening, Zahara hosted the first Bellamy House Worker Appreciation Gala. No exclusive guest list built around status. No room arranged to flatter the rich. The people honored that night were tailors, drivers, assistants, cleaners, designers, and managers who had kept the company alive even while dishonest leaders ruled it. Zahara stood on stage in a simple ivory dress, her grandfather's necklace resting against her skin. Cassian watched from the front row. She looked at the room and smiled. For a long time, she said, I believed hiding kept me safe, but hiding also kept me from living fully. The room listened. I am done shrinking to survive. Applause rose around her, strong and warm. Zahara looked toward Cassian. He smiled softly. She smiled back. Not as a maid, not as a secret, not as a woman waiting to be believed, as Zahara Bellamy, heir, leader, survivor, and finally, free. Never judge someone by their uniform, silence, or position. The person serving your table might carry a story deeper than anyone in the room. The quiet worker in the corner might have more wisdom than the loudest person at the head of the table. The one people overlook might be the one holding the truth everyone else fears. Odette looked at Zahara and saw only a maid. Cassian looked at Zahara and saw a human being. That difference changed everything. Kindness reveals true class faster than money. Money can buy mansions, gowns, events, and applause. It cannot buy character. True class shows in how people treat those who cannot reward them. It shows in patience, fairness, humility, and respect. Love means respect before romance. Cassian did not win Zahara's heart because of wealth. He won her trust because he treated her with care before knowing her power. He defended her when others shamed her. He gave her space when trust needed healing. Truth always enters the room at the right time. Lies may hide behind locked doors. Pride may cover shame with polished smiles. Power may delay justice. But truth has a way of standing up when silence has carried pain long enough. If this story touched you, like this video, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton for more emotional stories about love, dignity, truth, and life lessons. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by people who knew nothing about your story?
Thank you for listening, and thank you for choosing stories that ask more of you. The next story will be waiting.